Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Why?
Before them stood the house of their nightmares.
I dreamt of doors and shadows.
You can't see anything. It is scary as fuck.
2 seconds.
Yeah,
My mouse
there we
hates me.
go.
Hello.
How's it going, everybody at home? Welcome to another episode of the Owl Light Society, so we don't get sued by Nickelodeon.
We're live.
Yeah.
But if we were to be sued by any entity, I would prefer Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, it depends on who's
They would
involved.
just sign us.
I mean, if Ren and Stimpy show up my door with a suitcase, then it's worth it. My time was well spent.
Woot.
Hey,
Right,
Tom Dog,
Tom.
what's up, man?
Hi, Tom Dog.
So for those of you that have never joined us for the Owl Light Society, this is a show where we tell you stories. We will read stories. We will do storytelling. We will tell you things we heard down the street from our cousins, uncles, nephews, roommate. All those things and so much more, or perhaps much less. We never really know until we get going. We do have someone new joining us today. If you'd like to introduce yourself, sir.
Oh, I guess that's me.
That would be you, yeah.
I'm Len M. Ruth. I'm author of The Unrecovered and the Pull, as you can see down here. The Unrecovered came out in May, and the Pull came out in October. And it took me like a collective 5 years to get them there. So it was like, yeah. It was a busy year. I'm going to chill for the first part of this one, sort of.
That's awesome, man. Oh, yeah. Well, we're thankful that you could join us for sure.
It's good to be here.
So my title today is actually a musical reference. And if anyone at home can figure that out, what it is, and put it in the chat by the end of the episode, I will give you a free ebook because that amuses me to do so today. It's a tough one. It is a tough one, but it is a reference. Once you hear the reference at the end of the show, though, you'll get it for those that are aware of that particular band. But we should probably get things started today. Who actually wants to go first? I'll go whenever. I have no preference.
And crickets.
1, 2, 3, not it.
Not it.
Just do this with your kids.
Oh, it's between Ron and Jenny.
All right, I'll go first, if just to get the ball rolling, because lead by
Run.
example, as they say.
Yeah, roll that ball.
Let's see. Does this story require any setup? Real short setup. This is the one and only actual paranormal experience that I've ever had in my entire life, and this has to do with the Waverly Hills Sanitarium and the body chute. I am a haunted house actor. For those of you unaware of what that means, if you've ever been to your local seasonal haunted attraction in October, perhaps put on by a high school or a Kiwanis, a 4-H club, or a professional business, I am one of the people who jump out at you and go, boo! Well, not boo per se, since boo in our industry is considered taboo. But it is my job for that 25 to 30 minutes you're in our house to fully immerse you and make you believe that monsters are real. And in my years of haunting, there's one thing that I have learned, that there is usually at least one person in the group who truly believes that their haunted house is, in fact, truly haunted. I get asked all the time if I've ever witnessed or experienced any paranormal happenings at the haunt. Not once have I ever experienced anything I would consider remotely paranormal for any of the haunts I've worked at in my decade plus of haunt acting. No orbs, no manifestations, no objects mysteriously moving, no sudden drops in temperature, nothing out of the ordinary. I've come to my own personal conclusion that there is no such thing as ghosts. I'm a skeptic, to be sure, but that's not to say I don't believe in the possibility of ghosts being able to exist. If you look at it from a scientific standpoint, or metascience, parascience, is that a thing? Or perhaps pseudoscience. Either way, let me explain. If we go on the premise that everything gives off energy, or life force, whatever you want to call it, then where does that energy go when the creature ceases to exist? Is it transformed into another form of energy? Does it dissipate? Does it just remain out there stagnant, waiting for a catalyst to rejuvenate it? Scientists have studied energy transformations and tried to build a better mousetrap to determine what happens to this energy. I'm of the opinion that the energy is still out there. You can't see it, but just like your gut telling you something is off when you walk into a bad situation, if you're sensitive enough, maybe you can feel it. So it's there. Now, if we take Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared, energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared, then it's possible that this residual energy just floating out there can't be seen because it has no mass. But if there was a way to slow it down so that it becomes part of the visible spectrum, then it would appear in roughly whatever shape it held in life, right? So really, a ghost is nothing more than a unique energy signature that's moving too quickly for the human eye to see, or at the very least, not moving cohesively enough to give it a visual mass in the spectrum. Like gas, you can't see it, but you know it's there. So whether my theory is full of shit or not, there's only ever been one instance in my life which I would consider paranormal, simply by the mere fact I cannot explain it any other way. This happened at Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. My boss and the owner of the haunt I worked for, Kelly, was also in charge of coordinating the Midwest Haunters Convention pre-convention bus tour, which included several haunts within the surrounding area of Columbus. This year, the tour would take us to Louisville, which has several haunts within proximity of each other, including Waverly Hills. As a bonus, I and several of my haunt family got to ride down to Louisville in January with Kelly to go tour the haunts firsthand to see which would be willing to open out of season for the convention. Waverly Hills was our last stop. This process was time-consuming, as you can imagine, with 7 or so haunts on the list to visit, and along with some sightseeing around Louisville, we were late getting into Waverly. It was about 11:30 at night by the time we pulled up in front of this historic building. And it being January, it was almost unbearably cold. So we were all bundled in our winter jackets while we waited in the gift shop for the owner to come meet us. While Kelly and the owner of the landmark, Tina, talked about their business, the rest of us were given free rein to tour the grounds as much as we wanted. Our group consisted of me, an actor trainer, Doug, our lead ringmaster clown Barnabas, our audio and visual expert Marco, and a paranormal investigator enthusiast Harry, all top-notch actors, all with their own set of skills that every haunt would want to work for them. To wit, the kind of guys you'd want on your team. If you're unfamiliar with Waverly Hills, it functioned as a hospital in the early 1900s for people suffering from tuberculosis. They did not know much about how to treat tuberculosis at the time. They thought exposure to open air to promote fresh oxygen intake would benefit the patients. So a good majority of the building is large spaces open to the outside. We traversed that building from bottom to top with no supervision, no security guards, no one to tell us where we couldn't go. If it wasn't locked or barricaded, we went in it. We explored for quite some time. I mostly walked around on my own, but Harry and Marco and Doug did their paranormal experiments by calling out to whatever spirits may be present, checking their equipment for readings. I didn't pay much attention. I enjoyed the solitude, the quiet peace of it all. Yet there was one place we all wanted to go that was locked up. It was called the Body Chute. We had to wait for Kelly and Tina to finish their discussion before we were allowed to enter it. The Body Chute is the most unique aspect of the place. Back when the sanatorium was operational, it existed as a means of transporting expired patients out of the hospital unobserved by the other patients. It was believed that if the surviving patients were to see their fellow patients being carried out, it would be bad for morale, that they would lose hope. Therefore, when a patient died, the body would be taken out at night through the Body Chute, which ran through the mountain to the other side, where it would be loaded into a vehicle and transported for burial or whatever the family decided should happen to the body. For this reason, the Body Chute came to be known as the most haunted part of Waverly Hills, that it was a spot where most spirits lingered, not willing to move on to the other side. Remember, I don't believe in ghosts, just the possibility of ghosts, but the Body Chute made me question that belief that night. The Body Chute runs about a quarter of a mile long. It is a straight shot, gradual descent to the other side of the mountain. Half the trek a smooth, flat surface for the gurneys to roll down, and the other half are steps for the humans guiding the gurneys. There's no lighting, or rather, there was at one time, but it is no longer in use. You would need a flashlight or some other method of illumination to see. Otherwise, it's very close to pitch black inside. After Tina and Kelly had rejoined us, Tina unlocked the door at the top and let us all inside. She said we could walk down to the bottom. I didn't wait for an invitation and immediately set off with my hands in my pockets for warmth. As cold as it was outside in the January air, it was much colder inside the tunnel with its stagnant air and little ventilation. I was followed by Marco, then Harry, then Doug. Tina had a flashlight with her at the top of the tunnel, and it was enough to cast an ambient glow for a short distance, but eventually they faded out of sight as we entered the blackness. Harry, however, had his ghost gadget out, doing whatever it did, but the light from it was enough that I could see by, as my eyes had already adjusted to the dark. That's when shit got weird. About 3/4 of the way down, Harry shouted, "Guys, something just touched my back." Doug, who was walking behind him, said, "I'm right behind you, Harry. It wasn't me. There's nothing here." I think that's the point Marco pulled out his cell phone to activate his flashlight. Visually, there was nothing there, but there was something there. As the flashlight panned the small space, that's when I saw it, but only for an instant. The end of the tunnel was in sight, and I could see the door at the bottom was open. Standing in front of it was a very dark shadow. It had a humanoid figure and 2 pinpricks of glowing orbs where its eyes would be. In that moment, a cold, stronger than the outside temperature, shot through me, causing instantaneous goosebumps. I shivered as I exhaled visible breaths, my eyes wide as I felt the shadow looking directly at me. I wish I could say the cliche, I was frozen in shock, but something compelled me to move forward, closer to the shadow, as if beckoning me. I could say my heart was racing, or I stood there in fright, but truthfully, I don't know. Nothing else in the tunnel seemed to exist at that moment except for me, the shadow figure, and the open door, waiting for me to step through it. I continued walking slowly toward the shadow, unable to control myself. I was caught in its embrace, and it was pulling me in, not even against my will. I had no will, just the all-consuming urge to want to find out what lied beyond that open door. I was alone in the tunnel. Marco, Harry, Doug, they all disappeared. It was the quiet solitude I had always been looking for. Not a feeling of loneliness, just embracing the comfort of being alone. The shadow offered me that. It was compelling. While there were no audible words, no voice in the back of my mind, I knew all I had to do was step through the door, and I would have it. I would like to use another cliche and say the moment seemed to stretch on forever, but it didn't. And the second swing of Marco's phone's flashlight, the shadow receded just as quickly, disappearing through the open door. My eyes focused back in, and I saw the 3 guys staring at me. Ron, are you okay? It took me a second to find my voice. Did you see that? I asked, not even sure now what it was I saw. See what? Doug replied. The shadow of the door. The door was open. We looked at the door. The door was not open. In fact, the door was barricaded by a large metal bar across it so that it couldn't be opened. There was plastic hung in front of it, which, other than some minor rips, was undisturbed. I don't know what you saw, but it's not open now, Doug said. This place is weirding me out, I said. I'm going back up. I began walking again, this time up the chute. The guys followed behind. They chattered amongst themselves, but I paid no attention. My mind was still fixated on the shadow and that lingering feeling that the open door had given me. The walk back up to the top of the chute was uneventful. Kelly and Tina were still waiting by the entrance. Where did you guys go? Asked Kelly. What do you mean? Asked Harry. Kelly said, I could see you part of the way down. Then it was like a shadow passed in front of you, and I could no longer see you. Again, I felt goosebumps, but I said nothing. Well, Marco had his flashlight on, said Doug. You should have been able to see us the whole time. Ron said the door was open when he got down there, said Marco. That door is not open, said Tina. That door hasn't been opened in probably 30 years, maybe longer. I don't know what I saw, was all I said in response. Well, there is something here, said Tina. That was the shadow. Other people have reported seeing it or something like it. I've been here long enough. I've seen it a few times myself. Now I don't think about it much. It's just part of the job. Fortunately, Kelly, being the rational mind, broke the jittery anxiety I think was building up in the 4 of us. I'm cold. It's after 3 a.m. and we need to get back on the road. He turned to head out of the body chute and Tina followed suit. Harry wasn't quite done yet. He pulled out his ghost gadget and said, this is a spectrometer. It has 3 colored lights on it, white, yellow, and red. It'll blink yellow if there's anything near and red if something is present. We can use it to communicate. He set the device on the ground and we stood around it. Is there anyone here? Harry said loudly. We watched the lights. They flickered between white and yellow. Did you die here? Asked Doug. The light flickered between yellow and red this time. This brought a jolt to the group and we looked around at each other. Marco spoke up. If you want us to leave, turn all the lights off. And just like that, right on cue, all the lights on the gadget blinked out. Again, the goosebumps, except this time, I don't think I was the only one feeling them. That's enough for me, I said. I can take a hint. I turned and promptly hoofed it out the door back into the January chill. It did not take long for the rest of the guys to follow me. I think at that point we were of the same mind. It was time to go. We said our goodbyes to Tina and thanked her appreciatively for letting us tour the place so late. Once piled back into the car, Kelly steered us back onto the road leading away from the sanatorium. The rest of the guys were all chattering back and forth about what they had seen or experienced and talking about what had just happened with the ghost gadget and the body chute when Harry said, guys, my back is burning. He was wearing a thick Green Bay Packers jacket and maneuvered himself to pull it off. Marco, can you see if there's anything on my back? Harry lifted his shirt, and there, in brilliant display, was a bright red hand mark contrasting against Harry's pale skin. The shape of the fingers was lengthened like something had clawed Harry down his back. The print was slightly swollen. Yo, holy shit, exclaimed Marco. What is it? Asked Harry, now alarmed. Dude, you've got this massive handprint all over your back, said Doug. Let me take a picture, said Marco, pulling out his phone. He snapped the shot, then handed the phone to Harry. What the fuck, said Harry. He pulled his shirt back down and tried to sit back into the passenger seat. He passed the phone around to everyone to see. I can't explain the handprint, and I wish I could say I had proof that the door was open when I got to the bottom of the chute, but I can't. However, the picture of Harry's back was not the only proof that came out of that night. We had all posted photos of our trip to our Facebook pages. One of mine was a picture from the top of the body chute that had been taken with the flash on the camera. Otherwise, it would have been too dark to see anything. As you can expect, the photo was grainy for being so low light. I thought nothing of it, but after I told my story, Case, one of the airbrush artists and prop designers that also worked for our haunt, reposted it, but zoomed in and enhanced. I don't know, Ron, Spo said. Once I blew it up, I saw this. The picture was dithered, as some digital photos tend to be, if not taken in a high-resolution format. But there, among the pixelation, was a solid black shape, slightly standing out from the dithering. It was humanoid, and there, set up against the blackness, were 2 glowing pixels where the eyes should have been. I don't know if it was Photoshop trickery, but I doubt it. Maybe like those haunters who so strongly want to believe that their haunt they work for is truly haunted, I wanted to believe that there truly was a shadow man at the end of the body chute and that the door was open. Unfortunately, the shadow figure in the picture obscured the door behind it. It was too hard to discern if it was open or closed. I still stand by what I saw. The door was open. As I said, I can't explain any of this away. My skepticism was rocked that night, and perhaps that is why the experience happened to me and none of the others. They were too willing to believe. For them, it wouldn't have been so monumental. It wouldn't have shaken their core beliefs. They would have been ecstatic if something like that happened to them. I, on the other hand, being a skeptic, am now stuck with that experience for as long as I live, not knowing how to rationalize the overwhelming desire I had to want to step through that door. I don't know what would have happened if I had. Would I have disappeared? Would I have died? They'd be carrying me out of the body chute, notifying my parents of their loss. That's hard to think about. As per the mark on Harry's back, I firmly believe that was a warning, because he was the biggest believer in the group, the one trying to find proof. He would likely have been the one to bring the unwanted attention to the spirits that roamed the place, disrupting the peace. After feeling what I felt toward the open door, I can understand that. The shadow was warning him to leave well enough alone. Thankfully, he did. I've been back to Waverly Hills several times since then. Tina did open it up for the Midwest Haunters tour, but the tour was in the daylight. There were close to 300 people across 4 buses on the tour, and as they scattered around the grounds taking their own pictures, I walked, mostly by myself, enjoying the sunshine, the warmth, and the not darkness. As usual, I was wrapped up in my quiet solitude. Tina did open the body chute for the haunters and other public tourists to explore that day, but me, I stayed away from it. I never went back down the body chute again.
That's fucking epic, man.
I love it.
I liked it a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, boo is a bad word, pal.
Boo is a bad word.
So I've actually also been down to Waverly. It's so my great uncle Tommy worked for Waverly in the 80s. There was this small, it wasn't like Waverly proper, but there was this small building that was kind of attached to the, I guess the campus you could call it, that still did some outpatient stuff. And when we would go down and visit them in Kentucky, we would stay at his house usually. And there was a couple times as a kid where we didn't have a key to get in, so we'd have to actually go to his job and get the key in order to then go open his house and everything. But one time we had to wait on him for like almost 2 hours because he was, I don't know what he was doing exactly. I was too young to even remember what he was doing, but he felt bad about it and he offered us a tour. And that was the first of like multiple times where he actually got permission to take us on like this little tour and stuff. And I actually got to go. The first time I went down there, I think I was like maybe 6 years old the first time I went down there, and it scared the shit out of me. It was amazing, but it scared the shit out of me, man. I've not been back as an adult. Actually, like the last time I think I was there, I was probably only like 9 or 10. So like it's been like over 3 decades since I've been there. I've been wanting to go back as an adult, like really mad.
I think now if I were to actually go back to it, I think I would be okay to go back down the body chute now. I think I'd be able to handle it more, upon retrospect and, sort of thinking through it in my own head. Because I would find it very hard to believe that lightning could strike twice. Like, I'd have another experience there. But
right.
I mean, I've heard of other people, they say that they've had experiences in at Waverly or in the body chute and so on. But, I don't know. It's kind of an intrinsic thing. It's an intrinsic feeling that you can't really understand unless it's actually happened to you.
I didn't. I mean, it was like a private. This was only a couple of us doing like your situation was only a couple of people, except we all stayed together. Obviously, I was a child, so my mom and my brother and sister were like right there with my great uncle and my grandma. But like, I didn't have like a paranormal experience per se. Like the couple times I went there, but like I did feel like. You get that feeling that you're being watched, which could be explainable, power lines, like a million different things you can explain that with. But it was still a really creepy feeling to feel that inside there. But I did also get a weird vibe of like, it was like every time I walked in the building, there was like not depression, oppression, I guess is a better term for it. You just kind of, I can't explain it. Like down there, I just felt like everything was pushing against me. And I'm not like claustrophobic or anything at all. It wasn't even that. Just the pressing of like bodies in a small room kind of a feeling.
Yeah, and I mean there is a room at the bottom that was basically a morgue, and where they would store the patients before shipping them out down the body chute. And even running through there, standing in there late at night as we were, and still nothing. You know, it was only the body chute that creeped me out the most.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff, man. The things that we did to bodies, or people that weren't even actually all even dead at the time when they got thrown down the chute to begin with, just thought to be dead in some cases.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That was a good one, man. I enjoyed that. Next sacrifice for the fire.
Right. Next to slide down the body chute.
Okay.
How you feeling, Len? You feeling ready?
Sure, I'll do it. I love
All right.
that like happened to you in a place called the body chute. Like how? Yeah,
that's what they call it.
Quick question: was that particular place the inspiration for like the movie Death Chute?
Oh no, there's shoots like that all over the United States, well, other countries too. But
all right,
but I don't know if that particular one was or not. I mean, I'll look it up.
me, send me down.
All right, let me pull Len up here on the screen for us. There we go.
All right, this one's kind of, well, you'll see. I have a very off sense of humor. I'm not going to say too much about it. I'm just going to dig in. This one's called The Exterminator. Dennis folded the paper and took a bite of toast. The sound of the newsprint folding went on for a microsecond longer than it should have. He flicked his eyes around the dimly lit room. Silence, dark, all as it should be. The cooked bread crunched loud enough in his head to drown out all the other sounds, of which there were none. Dennis swallowed. Movement at the edge of the table. He snapped his head in that direction. Nothing there but chipped formica. Dennis sipped at his rapidly cooling coffee without taking his eyes from the spot. And then his peripheral vision there by the stove. He shot to his feet. Nothing. There was nothing. He set the paper down. The news was full of stories about the alarming rise in pest infestations fueled by global trade. Not good breakfast reading. If he didn't start getting ready, he'd be late. Again. So, in the shower, he gave his glistening carapace an extra brushing, trying to shake the creepy, crawly feeling. After toweling his antennae, Dennis scuttled to the bedroom, put on sexy short boxers that accentuated his anal style, and dressed in a sporty undershirt with 4 short sleeves. The toast. He'd forgotten to finish his toast. Dennis scurried back down the hall. There it sat. Raisin toast. Except Dennis hated raisins. Son of a... He dashed for the table and grabbed the newspaper. Raisins dashed from the plate, along with pale white shapes that had blended in with the bread from across the room. The scurrying figures disappeared under the lip of the table before Dennis could get the paper rolled up and brought to bear. This couldn't be happening. Dennis was clean. Meticulous even. He never left dishes in the sink. He kept the floors swept and mopped. And also Dennis sealed the areas where the pipes and electrical wiring came in the house with pest-repelling putty. And of course, he'd sprayed the outside surfaces with pesticide 2 feet up and 2 feet out. No organic matter cluttered the perimeter, just sharp rock. That was how exterminators kept their home, and Dennis was very good at his job. Hallucinations, maybe. He did work with some very nasty chemicals, and if writer Wilhelm Burroughs was correct, one could get pretty high from the stuff. But no, Dennis conducted his work with care and attention to detail. Sleep deprivation, then? For the past several nights, little creatures filled his dreams, crawling into his ears, nose, and mouth while he slept, eating him alive from the inside out. Something moved on the counter. This was happening. It was real. They were real. Time to act. His mandibles clicked with nervous energy and his antenna waved, testing the air. He could feel them watching him, waiting for him to leave the room. So, he'd give them what they wanted. Dennis pretended it was just another ordinary evening, getting ready for work. He slipped his spiked arms into all four sleeve of his exterminator's uniform and brushed an errant bit of lint from the name badge sewn over the thorax pocket. Outside, the sky still held the pink glow of the setting sun. The city stirred to life, buzzing and clicking with another night's activity. Everything seemed normal. His van sat in the driveway as it should. With a click of the fob, the vehicle's locks chirped open. Dennis went to the back, opened the doors, and prepared for battle. He checked the sprayer tank, full. The yellow rubberized suit slid over all his legs and arms as if it knew the way, which he supposed it did. Someone called his name as he reached back to pull on the hood. He turned. Matilda. Her fat body advanced across the lawn in a pale yellow house dress. She gesticulated wildly as she ran, her antenna dancing and probing at the air in front of her. Dennis! Dennis! Thank God! Something's been eating my egg case. There's already a nymph missing. Please, Dennis, can you come before you go to work? I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm sure you have a full schedule, what with the evening news, but Dennis patted the air with his lower claws in a calming gesture while slipping the hood over his head with the upper two. I'll come over after I've finished with my own house, he said, doing his best to sound authoritative and keep the rising panic out of his voice. It wasn't just his house then. The entire neighborhood must be crawling with vermin. Have you come into direct contact with any pests? His voice echoed inside the thick rubber helmet. Matilda spit on her claws and ran them over her antennae as if to wash away the filthy thought. No? All right. Put your egg case in the car and wait outside. Get everyone out. Condensation coated the inside of his faceplate. With a practiced claw, Dennis reached down and checked the air supply valve. Don't you think that's a bit drastic? She asked. Dennis could see the segments of her abdomen rippling under her dress. He knew it was a nervous reaction, but his anal style twitched, thinking about what her ovipositor valve might be doing under the fabric. He shook himself. They're here, in the neighborhood. This is war, Matilda. Protect the young. I'll be right over. To punctuate his words, Dennis racked the handle of his sprayer with a satisfying metallic clunk. Is anyone else home? No, Well, then you'd better go see to your egg case, he said, closing the van doors. Oh, my God! Matilda ran back the way she'd come. Dennis watched the yellow material slide across her wings as she retreated. He felt terrible. This was war, but he was a male first. Instinct. Survival of the species. All that. He pushed the thought away. The tank clicked into the place in the back harness as he advanced up the walk. The suit's rubber boot made a thwap, thwap sound. There, at the edge of the foundation, a line of tiny figures. Pale, brown, black, yellow, a rainbow of filth lined up and moving into his house. His house. Dennis clicked the sprayer on before he'd aimed it at the tiny, filthy mammals. Take this, you mindless little cul-de-sacs of evolution. The poison rained down on the humans in a deluge of destruction. Their squishy little bodies recoiled and writhed on the sharp stones. They scattered, running in circles, rubbing at their bodies before flopping on their backs and squirming their last. Fuckers, he grunted, ascending the steps to the porch. Inside the darkened house, nothing moved. No sounds permeated the rubber hood. He had the advantage. Humans didn't see well in the dark. He took a step forward, scanning for movement with practiced, segmented eyes. He wished for the sense of his antennae, but necessity dictated they be encased in rubber like the rest of him. Years of experience led his steps to the kitchen. On the table, his half-eaten toast was gone. Fuck. Rookie mistake. He'd let his revulsion override his the better instincts of his evolved insectile brain. Rule 1, secure all foodstuffs. Fucking toast. His mind replayed the images of the humans running from the surface of his toast. A tingling in his exoskeleton announced the oncoming psychosomatic itches. His mind showed pictures of repugnant humans crawling all over his carapace. Rubber crinkled as Dennis reached back to scratch at an irritation on his hind wing, but the thick suit denied him the satisfaction. best get on with the job. Humans were resourceful pests, but not great climbers. Not like the far superior and evolved cockroach at the top of the food chain. Dennis checked under the sink. There, a group of maybe 20 sat on a pack of cleaning sponges, munching on a toast crust. He brought the wand of his poison gun to bear. "Fuck you," he said, squeezing the trigger. A jet of sticky gel spattered the tiny beasts. A few managed to leap out of the way and disappeared among the bottles of cleaning products, but the bulk of the group fell on their backs, writhing in agony as the poison worked its magic. Dennis took a moment to enjoy his victory, poking the wiggling vermin with the tip of the sprayer as they jerked and crawled in senseless circles, their nervous systems overriding their scant animal intelligence. When the last of the vermin went still, Dennis used his lower claws to throw the bottles under the sink indiscriminately across the kitchen, while his upper claws trained the wand on the cabinet. He lifted a bottle of bleach. Another two sapiens leaped for the cover of the vinegar jug. A twitch of his claw plastered them with liquid death. They danced and squirmed, their tiny mouths working. Dennis couldn't hear their little screams through the suit, but his mind produced the nails on a chalkboard sound anyway. He'd heard it often enough in his job. When the cabinet was empty and the kitchen floor was an obstacle course of hurled bottles, Dennis rose and surveyed the room. The electrical outlets were another breeding ground for the simian savages. He couldn't spray murder mud into the sockets for fear of causing a short circuit and fire, and setting peanut butter and strychnine bait behind the outlet covers seemed too slow. Then he'd have to sleep knowing the little bastards were in the house, in the walls, watching him. No, they all had to die now. Unbidden, the image of him firebombing the house with flaming bottles of alcohol came to mind. Tempting, but all his stuff was here, and he doubted the insurance adjuster could be fooled into thinking it was an accident. Sharp pain bit into the back of his foot claw. The curve of his thorax and the immobility of the hood didn't allow a view of his boots. It came again. This time, agony came with it. Something stabbed through his suit. Dennis's terrified scream echoed horribly in his helmet. Even through the intense pain, the tickling of tiny creatures climbing up his leg was unmistakable. He turned to run, but his eyes met a sight that overrode the agony. The pan hanging over the stove. 100 humans heaved back and forth, causing the cast iron to swing wildly. Dennis brought the wand up. The pan flew off his hook, knocking him in the face. The world swam. No! Pain, sharp and intense, greeted Dennis as his mind swam out of the black. White-hot suffering lashed at his brain in alternating pulses. They'd cracked his exoskeleton above the eye, and the ache and wetness of his foot suggested blood. Unthinkable! Humans were working together, using tools. No human had ever shown this level of intelligence in any study Dennis ever heard of. He worked to right himself, but flat on his back, all 6 appendages flailed uselessly. The effort sent a fresh round of misery to his head, narrowing his vision. Through his good eye, Dennis saw the humans climbing his faceplate, moving toward a crack made by the flying pan. He brought up the claw, holding the poison gun, but the gun wasn't there. The glove came down on the glass, squashing the soft-skinned humans and leaving a smear of red that effectively blinded him. Dennis thrashed, slapping and flailing at the humans threatening to breach his suit. He couldn't see. Wiping the faceplate only spread the gore into a thin crimson film. Damn, these humans were sticky on the inside. As the pain in his head and foot diminished to an almost tolerable level, another sensation crept in, the tickling of crawling Homo sapiens on his carapace. Their musky stink overpowered the sterile scent of the rubber. No amount of struggling and thumping brought his claws into contact with the floor. He only spun on his back. They were in his suit, inside with him, filthy, disease-carrying, unclean humans. Time slowed. The click, click, click of his frantic mandibles kept time with the wiggling of his desperate digits. His arm slapped something hard. The stove. If he could just reach the oven door handle, he can pull himself up. Madly pumping all 6 appendages, Dennis tried desperately to get just a little closer and a little closer. There! He yanked on the handle. The oven door came down, smashing his already broken faceplate. Tiny shards of plastic tinkled down inside the hood. It didn't matter. The door was there now. He could pull himself up, except first he had to work himself out from under it. The blow to his head made his thoughts slow and fuzzy. It was like trying to see clearly at the bottom of a bowl of soup. Itching irritation between the segments of his abdomen brought his mind into focus. They were attacking him at his weakest points, the joints. Filthy, squishy fuckers. Dennis flexed, curling his body into a C shape, crushing the tiny invaders between the plates of his segmented abdomen. Wetness oozed down his sides. That would teach the little fuckers. Grabbing the oven door with his upper arms while keeping his thorax and abdomen curled brought Dennis's feet into contact with the floor. The lancing pain, that right foot claw meant he'd have to crawl. Whatever. Dennis needed to move, to get out, to tell someone, anyone, that the humans had changed, evolved, using tools unthinkable, coordinating attacks. He risked a quick roll, bumping onto the containers of cleanser he'd hurled from under the sink, but the resulting squishing wetness in his suit was worth it. Dozens more invading sapiens were now so much red jam on his exoskeleton. Dennis made for the archway to the living room, crawling on 2 hands and 1 leg. The injured metathorax leg dragged behind him, and his remaining hand clutched the humanicide sprayer. There, on the edge of the ill-advised carpet, Dennis realized the full scope of his peril. A line of Homo sapiens stood, arms akimbo, on the threshold. The little figures were only a few centimeters tall, and even though Dennis was many times their size and an order of magnitude stronger, this act of defiance, of courage, and self-sacrifice so unnerved him that he stopped, momentarily forgetting that he was the evolved one. He was the one who held the poison-spraying wand. Something pattered on the outside of his rubber suit like rain. He couldn't see what it was. The hood's design meant that he only had a 180-degree field of vision. And that was standing erect on 2 feet, not crawling on all 6s like his ancestors. When the first of the sapiens shimmered down the shards of his visor and entered the helmet, he realized his mistake. The humans on the edge of the carpet weren't the threat. They were the diversion. Tactics. The damn tiny pests weren't only working together and using tools, they displayed tactical thinking. That did it. He scuttled across the line of human vermin at top speed, using all 5 uninjured appendages. The poison wand dragged behind him and bumped on the doorframe as he passed. He reached for the doorknob, his arm a yellow blur. Dennis tumbled down the steps. On the lawn, he rolled over and over. The ape-descended parasites burst under the weight, staining the grass red. Then, with speed only a veteran exterminator could manage, Dennis doffed his suit and rolled again, scraping his carapace as he went. Finally, when he was sure this method could accomplish no more, he got painfully to his claws and stood checking himself, running his antennae over his entire body, probing at the joints for any last hangers-on. The gory liquid human remains on his shell stank. Dennis retched, clicking his mandibles and flexing his maxillary palps until the bile sank back to his gizzard where it belonged. It was only then, panting in the driveway behind the exterminator van, that Dennis noticed the noise. Screams rang out in all directions. His mind refused to believe it. Couldn't be. Must be a coincidence. Except one voice, the closest voice, echoed off his hard exterior in a very familiar and disturbing way. His antennae turned before the thought had fully formed. Matilda, in her driveway, just across an expanse of manicured lawn. Matilda's minivan rocked violently as she screamed within. His antennae told him the grass wasn't right, that it moved and rustled when it should be still. And he was loath to cross the no man's land of hidden horrors. Instead, he scurried down to the street. The lines of tiny figures emerged between the iron bars of a storm drain. Fuck me! His mind worked as fast as his legs, trying to come up with a place that might be safe from the biblical infestation of pestilence. The blacktop scraped and stung Dennis's injured claw as he ran up Matilda's driveway. He opened the door to her van before he could think better of it. A sea of humidity poured out of the vehicle like water from a pitcher. The sheer mass of the onslaught toppled him backwards onto the grass. The tiny creatures crawled out of the lawn onto his body. He scraped frantically with all 6 claws, but there were just too many. The humans cut his last scream short as they entered his throat. That's it. That's how it ends.
Nice.
That was
wow.
awesome.
I really
love
liked it
it.
a lot. Like,
That was very Kafka-esque. Also, I'm
Great
out.
point
There's
of
no
view.
way I'm topping that.
let's talk about topping.
I am no longer a writer. I bid you
Quit.
well adieu.
That's it. I'm done. My first thought on it was I started thinking of Joe's apartment when you mentioned the toast.
Yeah.
That's
Like
that's
there,
what I-
had, there, yeah, there just had to be raisin toast in there, right? Like they're just like I feel like it was the obvious joke, and if I didn't do it,
It was appreciated.
and that was before I realized that the roles had been reversed, that this was from the cockroach point of view. And then I started thinking about I guess it was Creep Show with the scientist that's in the sterilized room, and then somebody's trying to get revenge on him, so they let loose all the cockroaches, and he's trying to battle them off. I started going there, and then I was like, oh, this, now we have this human-sized cockroach, and the humans are actually cockroach-sized humans, and it's just, I thought, wow, okay, that's a neat little twist.
It was, yeah. I really
I'd be
enjoyed that.
interested to see what the fork in evolutionary history that would have led to cockroaches becoming the top of the food chain.
right?
Hell yeah.
There's something interesting that I heard about. What's that?
It's now definitely one of my top favorite cockroach stories ever.
Oh yeah.
But you were about to say?
Oh yeah, no. I'm gonna get the science all wrong, but it was like the reason that insects used to be much larger and now they're smaller is that they don't have a cardiovascular system. So like they have these like little sphericals on the sides of their bodies that air sort of goes through. So like their motion of them sloshing around is what moves the oxygen through their bodies. And back, like in evolutionary terms, when they used to be much larger, it was because the atmosphere had a much higher oxygen content than it does, or something like that. Like, don't ask me about the time periods. I'm not a numbers guy, but I always thought that was cool. Like,
so I guess it would be possible to have like a cockroach kaiju. The more you know.
That's why we keep that in there, just for a moment. Okay.
That's awesome.
So we need a cockroach kaiju.
So what you're saying is Mothra could be a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's
So,
a great storyline.
Thank
who
you.
would like to go next?
I can. I'm not sure how
Who
my
wants to
internet is
follow
doing.
up that?
I am
You're
not
good.
going to be anywhere near as good, but I can at least tell my own story.
It's not about who's better. It's about sharing stories.
Oh, of
That's
course
right.
it is.
A little bit ago, I shared a story about a little girl who was talking to Death, and he had come to take away her mom. And I had started thinking about what the rest of her life would be. And this is a good jump forwards to when she's working at a nursing home. But it's a nursing home that her two other of her family members of two other generations and possibly some cousins have worked at before. And I put it in a journal format because that's what made sense. Here's some excerpts from her journal. In the beginning, Pepperidge Nursing and Rehabilitation allowed residents and their pets to come to live as the small town nursing home grew and figured out what itself and nursing home should be, the residents came and went. Some home and some to their final resting place. Since 1938, we have cared for our residents and given them a loving, comfortable home to enjoy their time. September 3rd, Clive wants coffee. It's a bright, beautiful, sunny day, and I'm going to spend it at Pepperidge with, not farm, but Pepperidge with my residents. I typed the newly changed access code to walk in the front door and uh, walk in the front door. It's 1:50 p.m. and I already wonder if the dead are going to drive me insane with the living. Don't get me wrong, I understand some of them don't understand their predicament. Dementia and dying are hard to deal with, so I try my best daily. I clock in and walk past the hall A and down hall B, saying good afternoon to the hall B nurse, down to hall C, and take a right to go to the desk to ask if anybody new came in, if there's anything new, and to tell him to have a good night. Then I go down to the secure unit at the other end of 3 and its new monthly code and put in its new monthly code. I can't talk tonight, I apologize. And walk in. Sylvia is ready to give me a report. Miss Chili fell and was sent out, and everyone was doing their usual. As she is talking, I see Clive hasn't left yet. He's trying to get TJ, the med aide, to see him. He wants coffee. TJ can't see the spirits as far as I know, so Clive just gets more agitated. September 14th. Miss Phelps is still knitting. There have been many days where Miss Phelps and I would talk before she went to sleep. I would come help her get ready for bed and find her sitting in her comfortable recliner, singing quietly as she knitted a new item: scarves, socks, coasters, etc. As we did her nightly ablutions and dressed for bed, she would tell me stories of her life. Tonight was different. Good evening, Miss Phelps. How are you? I smiled at her. She lay there and didn't move. Her eyes were sunken. We seemed to be getting close to the time I never look forward to, no matter how long I've been a CNA. I did an assessment of how she seems to be doing. I'll be back shortly. After my round, I will come sit with you for a bit, I assured her. I could feel the tears wanting to well up, but I had to do my job. The others needed to be cared for as well. After making sure everyone had ice, water, and were as comfortable as possible, I came back and sat next to her, holding her hand. It was surprisingly quiet tonight. After my second round of the night, I ended up meeting my charge nurse, Len M, as she checked on Miss Phelps. She passed away while I was doing the last round. She made her new notes as tears started to fall down my cheeks. I went to get the supplies to give her the last care I will ever give. I wiped away my tears as I said goodbye when I finished the last part of Miss Phelps' life care. I left her to go answer the ending call lights. The funeral home came to whisk her away for their part of the process relatively soon, about 5 a.m. I continued my last round as I chugged through the end of the shift. Letitia came in late the next morning. Her eyes caught me. Makeup and eyelashes on point, but tired from sitting in the tired pain sitting in those beautiful brown eyes. I hugged her and gave her the report. As for her stuff, no pushing, not my business, as she deemed so. I got home and found out Marnie was off, so we got the kids off to school and went back to bed. She got up later and I slept until 6. because she was home to get the kids. We did homework and had family dinner. I went back at 9:50 to start all over again. I'm toddling along to get everybody willing to finish with the bedtime routine and into bed. I stopped dead in my tracks as I hear a voice I shouldn't hear. I glance over to see Miss Phelps knitting and singing a song I can't fully hear. September 23rd. All the emotions at once. I made it home and sat in the driveway to breathe. The tears started rolling hard. I couldn't tell if it was relief, fear, or confusion. That bothered me more than the night before. More than one resident has claimed they had seen the little boy before they passed, but I'd never seen him before. The fact that he was sitting in the corner of the ceiling above Miss Catherine's bed singing five little speckled frogs, like my youngest favorite girl does constantly throughout the day, chilled my bones. As my mind was dealing with the fearful realization, Miss Catherine gave a final death rattle. Her spirit got up and walked through the wooden door, leaving an imprint of her face that even Imani hadn't seen. If another CNA didn't see it too, she would have not believed it. No, yeah, she would not have believed it. I can't tell if it's a real child or another type of being. None of us have for the past 3 generations. Like he is tied to the land but not the building. Is it something else than a concerned boy? The passenger side of the car opened, startling me out of my terrified thoughts. Marnie sat down and shut the door. Oh, baby, was another resident's death or an encounter that has you like this? She inquired as she rubbed my arm. Miss Catherine passed, and the little boy was singing Tilly's song. I blurted, having no idea how else to put it. Cherry Pie, come inside, and I'll hold you on the couch while you tell me all about it. She kindly directed me as she opened the door. I wiped my nose and eyes on the short sleeve of my scrub top and followed. We laid on the overstuffed couch. She threw a blanket on top of me and let me lay on her chest as I told her about finally seeing the little boy ghost. I walked in for my rounds. He was as they described him. Brown pants with suspenders and a white shirt, so pale and sitting upside down in the corner. Like his song would do something for her. It was soft and eerie sounding. I explained as tears fell down my face. Marnie stroked my hair as we talked. From all you have told me over the years, he doesn't like for the residents to die alone. Does something about this bother you? She inquired, not understanding. Not being medium mystic or spiritually inclined made some things hard to understand. Her first ghost experience hadn't been until their first date. I looked all I took all the stories to heart. Even my Aunt Janice had stories of the little boy when she worked there. My grandmother had stories too. Neither said they truly understood. I didn't want Miss Catherine to pass alone, so I went to see if I was too late. Luckily, I was not, but he showed himself to me. I had pulled a chair to the side of her bed and just held her hand as her breathing began to get worse. I tried my best to sing. I just let the tears fall silently. I heard a little boy singing the speckled frog song. At, as her at her last breath, he showed himself, and I fell out of the chair while staring wide-eyed at him. She got up and walked through the door, her body still there. When I stood, I saw her face print on the door. I ran to get Amani to come look at the door. She saw it too. Marnie's shirt was damp with the tears. I jumped as Drops of Jupiter by Train started playing on her phone on the table beside the couch. Marnie turned it off. She smiled and said, "Cherry Pie, let's go get our babies ready for school so you can go to bed." Okay. That's the story so far.
Nice. I like that you're doing it in the journal format, though. I think that really works well for the story because I've seen pieces of this.
Yes.
Is this one you're going to continue? Do you have an idea where it's going?
I have an idea for various parts of the story. I haven't figured out how it ends. I just have figured out various scenes
I know how that goes.
because
Does
it starts out as a story and then it goes into journal format for the moment because I haven't figured out what I'm doing.
Gotcha.
now is the character nicknamed Cherry Pie because she's a big fan of Warrant?
The It's a popular song by my parents, and it had been heard so many times. And all my family calls the special people some sort of food name. Hey, honey bun. Hey,
Right.
my
And
brain
now
just crashed. So many
and-
different names, and Cherry
and
Pie
now I
just
have-
stuck for Marnie.
And now I have a visual of parents just singing lullabies that are culled from 80s hair metal.
Yeah.
Nice.
Len, you're muted.
As
We do
if
that all
that
the
song
time.
will be playing in my head for the rest of the night. Thanks.
You are welcome.
It's been
Oh,
playing
yeah.
in my head for years. So,
Well, you could say it
blame,
warrants to listen.
my dad.
Ah,
Yeah. That's a me level dad joke right there. Much appreciated. I tell some bad ones.
I will volunteer to go next.
Sounds good, man. Let me pop you up here.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, this particular story is titled "And to All a Good Night." I'm not pleased with that title so far, but that's not the point. This one, I managed to. The idea, the little germination of this story came to me on Christmas Day afternoon, and it just kind of sprouted from there. I spent hours then typing it out, and this is what came forth from the brain spew. So, it was Christmas Eve, 1982. As was customary for our family, we had our gathering at the old farm outside of Bloomfield that was built by our ancestors after immigrating from Germany. It was a unique house. My great-great-grandfather Carl and his brother Hans came to Nebraska around 1890, as most young immigrants did, and still do, to start a new life in the new world. They combined what money they had and bought a plot of land in northeastern Nebraska, nearby a new township called Bloomfield. The story goes they got a good deal on the land because it was so riddled with stones and large rocks that no one could farm it. However, Carl and Hans were from a long line of stonemasons and were raised in the trade at very young ages. When they arrived on their new plot of land, what everyone else viewed as a drawback, they saw as an opportunity. When they began to plow the land, every stone and rock they had to dig up, they put to use building their home. And since then, there was a lot of rocks and boulders buried underneath the land. It wasn't long before they crafted not only a good-sized two-story house, but also a massive barn that was adjacent to the house. Structures that have weathered the worst weather Nebraska could throw at them over the centuries. This was the house that my great-grandma Frida was born and raised in, along with her cousins that lived there as well. Over time, this family grew, weathering hardships and tragedies, some choosing to stay in the area, some choosing to find their own adventures elsewhere in the country. But we always came together at Christmas, back at this old house that still stands. There were many upgrades and changes done to the house over the decades, many done before I was even born, but it still retained its history, especially one particular room that used to be Great-Grandma's old bedroom. It was a smaller room, furnished with a single bed and a small wardrobe-style closet, but there was a large picture window, 3/4 the size of the far wall, with a view of the backyard area leading into the thick grove of trees. It was here where I found Great Ma, sitting and rocking in her rocking chair, staring out the window with an old book closed on her lap. The festivities of the evening were winding down. My family arrived on the farm earlier in the afternoon, after a journey in a cramped car with my 2 younger siblings and what seemed to take forever. I couldn't wait to play with my cousins and eat Grandma's cheesy potatoes and open the presents later that evening. And we did, along with watching the animated Christmas specials that were broadcast that night on Grandma and Grandpa's big, ancient color television. After the adrenaline of the night had dispersed and us children had settled down to a dull roar, I went off by myself to explore the old house. I did that whenever I visited. Back then, everything seemed bigger, more mysterious, especially the old farm. I wasn't a girl who was easily scared. Whenever I and the other cousins went to explore, I was the first one to check out the dark, shadowy, and scary rooms in the house, as well as the numerous other outbuildings that were added to the farm over time. The spider webs and their spiders, mice, and various other critters didn't startle me or make me go running. I would always imagine that I was an adventure from one of my books to discover treasure or rescue one of my cousins from the evil dragon/wizard/big bad evil whatever. Some of my aunts and uncles found this very unbecoming of a young girl. My parents, on the other hand, accepted having a tomgirl for a daughter. This particular Christmas Eve, I was roaming the dark, drafty hallways of the house, my mind wandering a bit, when I came across Great Ma's old bedroom. The door was open, so I peeked inside. The room was mostly dark, save for an old oil lantern that was lit, casting its flickering light from the top of the small wardrobe on which it was placed. Seated next to this light, in the rocking chair that I was told came from the old world along with my great-great-grandpa, was Great Ma, positioned diagonally, staring out the window and rocking slowly in the chair. There was a bittersweet look on her face. Forgetting my nocturnal adventure, I stepped silently into the room. I could almost immediately sense a kind of magic in the air inside this room, the kind that I always seemed to feel each time I opened a new book or walked inside a library. It was a feeling that excited and frightened me at the same time. Instinctively, I took in a deep breath, like I was trying to capture that aroma. I must have disturbed Great Ma's thinking. She stopped rocking and turned her head to look at me. "Who's there?" she asked. "It's me, Great Ma," I answered, embarrassed from disturbing her like that. I saw Great Ma smile wide. "Little Janet," she exclaimed. "Come in, little one, come in and know me better." I smiled and went inside. She was always quoting from her favorite Christmas story on Christmas Eve, so I recognized the invitation. I sat down on the edge of the bed next to her chair. She held out her frail hand and I took it. She squeezed my hand and I squeezed back. "Are you the ghost of Christmas present?" I asked playfully. She chuckled, a mischievous twinkle in her eye as she looked at me. "You may be right. I just might be," she answered. Then an oddly sad look came over her face for just an instant. I looked down on her lap to the book that I saw when coming in. It was a small, very old book, the size of a modern mass market paperback, but done in hardcover. The cover may have been done in a bright green, but over time it had been worn down to a dull dark green. Years of dust and grime and the oil and sweat of fingers reading and rereading maybe hundreds of times had given this book a characteristic all its own. The title of the book, stamped on the front cover in gold, was faded, but I could still make it out in the faint light of the lamp. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Naturally, she always had it around this time of year. She noticed me looking at the book. She smiled and picked it up, looking at it lovingly. "Ah, yes," she said, "this old friend of mine. I got this on a Christmas Eve long ago when I was your age, as a matter of fact." She looked back out the window into the distance. This was also the night our family was visited by two very odd strangers, travelers, if you will. She looked back at me, the twinkle in her eyes dancing. "Would you like to hear that tale, my dear?" she asked. I nodded my head excitedly. "Well then." She looked back out the window, the book back on her lap, but still holding on to it. "Like I said, I was your age on this particular Christmas Eve, and I and all of the family that lived in this big house were all gathered together in the fireplace room, which was and still is the largest part of this house. We had stopped bringing in one of the evergreens to decorate a couple of years back after that squirrel incident, but we decorated the walls, the fireplace, everything inside." She looked at me, a small smile on her lips. Christmas was always a magical time for this family. Even the grown-ups never lost that sense of wonder. She took a deep breath and looked back out the window. That night, it was the same. We mostly made the presents that we gave each other back then, and we cherished them all. That year, Uncle Hans had hand-carved wooden toy guns for all the boys, and Aunt Miriam made hand-sewn dolls for all the girls, complete with homemade dresses and bonnets. My father and mother, however, had given me this book here. She patted the book. It was brand new back then, something they purchased from the general store in Bloomfield. Between the two, I considered the book the greatest gift. She chuckled. Of course, back then it was considered, let's say, odd for a girl to want to read all the time. I received a considerable amount of ribbing at the hands of my aunt and cousins, along with my own siblings, because of my love of reading and learning. Aunt Miriam wasn't too pleased that I left the doll that she made for me untouched, preferring to sit near the fireplace on the floor and read my new book. Soon after all the gifts were exchanged, Father and Uncle Hans left the house to tend to the animals and evening chores. The children were allowed to remain and play with their gifts. 10 minutes after they left, however, Uncle Hans opened the door, an excited look on his face, rattling off commands to the boys in German. He never bothered to learn English. He always considered it to be bah humbug. Great Ma giggled at the reference. It was why we all learned both English and German, so we could understand what Uncle Hans was yelling at us about. It was common German, mind you. If Father and Uncle Hans wanted to talk privately around us, they would just speak in High German. "Is she bothering you, Grandma?" A loud, booming voice startled me. I looked behind us, and Uncle Dennis's head was poking through the doorway, the permanent scowl directed at me. "No, she's not. I was telling her a story," Great Ma replied. A look of annoyance crossed her face. "She should be getting ready for bed with the rest of the children," Uncle Dennis replied, looking like he was going to step in and grab me from the bed. I cowered a bit. "She's fine where she's at." Something in Great Ma's voice made him stop dead in his tracks. "Now, I said I was telling her a story, and she will go to bed when I'm good and finished doing so. Now, shoo, get out." Uncle Dennis shot another disapproving glance at me, then, without saying a word, turned around and went down the hall. Great Ma snorted. "He's not even the oldest of the grandchildren, but he always has to be the one in charge." She looked at me again, that recognizable twinkle flashing. "He's all bark and no bite. Everyone knows this. There's no need to be afraid of that bully." I smiled, relieved. She straightened up a bit and looked back out the window. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Uncle Hans was instructing the oldest boys to put on their coats and boots, saying that he and Father found something strange lying in the snow near the barn. There was something about blood. I was really curious, so I also put on my coat and boots to join them. That got a disapproving look from my aunt, but I was known to join my father and the boys in their adventures, so nothing was said to stop me from doing this. It was snowing slightly that night, and the snow wasn't considerably deep, maybe slightly above my ankles. We followed Father and Uncle Han's footprints around to the front of the barn, where we found him knelt over a dark figure lying in the snow. As we got closer, we noticed there were patches of red in the snow, darker and more abundant around the figure. When we got there, Father looked up, the light of his lantern showing a body we had never seen the likes of before. It was my size, smaller and human in shape, and looked like she was dressed head to toe in a fur suit. Only, as we got closer, it was very apparent that the fur suit was really its actual fur covering the body of what we at first thought was an animal. Only I could tell there was something different about this one. For starters, I could tell just by studying the body that this creature walked upright on two legs. The feet were larger than regular human feet, but contained 5 toes each, just like we did. There were arms with hands that were bigger than mine, but again had 4 fingers and a thumb. I remember years before when a traveling circus came through Bloomfield on their way to Wayne. They stopped for the night, and we all went to look at the animals they had. One of them was a chimpanzee, which is what my older brother William suggested this animal that lay before us was. Only I remember vividly what that ape looked like, and this wasn't it. It was the face. It was mostly covered in fur, but it looked more human than ape. Their eyes were open, and it was breathing, the breath visible in the cold night air. The eyes, though, they were afraid. It was looking right at us, and I could tell fear was registering in those eyes. I can't imagine what she thought, and yes, the creature turned out to be female. I could tell without looking too closely. There was a shotgun wound on her side. We didn't hear a shotgun going off while in the house, and neither of the ones of my uncle and father brought with them looked like they were fired recently. One of my cousins pointed out that there were larger footprints leading out from the grove of trees, ending where she was laying. Father found her like that, so chances are she was shot while in the grove by another person. Father had stopped the bleeding and had used the handkerchief as a bandage for the wound. "Come, everyone, into the barn," he said. We all helped to carry her gently into the large barn, getting us all out of the cold. She didn't move or struggle. I don't know how much blood she lost or if she was so terrified she couldn't move to fight back. After what happened later, I'm pretty sure none of us would have survived if she did, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Great Ma turned to me again. "Are you enjoying the story? Do you wish for me to continue?" I was transfixed. I nodded my head furiously, urging her on. She seemed delighted at my enthusiasm. Well, after we got her situated on a bed of hay in the back, close to where they built a back passage back into the house, Uncle Hans instructed us all to let him and Father explain what happened to the women folk in the house. He also instructed all of us to never speak of this to anyone outside of the farm. Both my father and uncle seemed to know more about this than they let on, especially with the treatment of the creature. I decided to stay with her to maybe bring some comfort and put her at ease. When everyone went back into the house, I sat down in front of her and smiled. She still seemed tense. "Hi," I said, waving a little. "My name is Frida. This is my home. Well, not this part. This is the home for our animals. I live just past that door." I pointed at the door that led into the house. "And those were my brothers and cousins that just left. The 2 big men were my uncle and father. They were the ones who found you." She did seem to relax a bit. Maybe she could understand me? I decided to test this theory. So I asked, "Do you have a father? A family?" Her eyes widened, and she actually smiled a little. Then she started nodding her head. I was surprised. She could understand me. Whatever this was, maybe she wasn't human, but she was close to one that I could understand. I was hit with an idea. I stood up, which startled her a bit. I held out my hands to put her at ease. "Stay here," I said. "I'm going inside to get something, and I'll be back in just a minute." I then turned and went through the door, down the short hallway into the back of the house. I went as fast as I could to the fireplace room, where I left my doll and my book. I grabbed those, ignoring the protest from everyone to take the boots off in the house, and went as fast as I could back to the barn through the back entrance. But when I got back, she was gone. She was no longer on her bed of hay. I searched the barn, and I couldn't find her. I sank down on my knees near the hay and began crying. I had lost her. She was alone and scared and probably ran off. I had failed my father. But then I heard a rustling in the hay beside me. I looked, and I saw what appeared to be a shape of the hay moving, but it wasn't the hay. Slowly, that shape began to fill in the fur and look of the girl creature until she was back on the bed of hay, looking wide-eyed at me. I was amazed at what I saw. "Wow," I said, "is that the way you hide from bad things?" She nodded back. Then she glanced at what I had brought from the house. I held out the doll to her. "Here, this is for you," I said. She looked curiously at the doll, sniffing at it, then slowly reaching for it. She finally took it from me, looked it up and down, and then finally held it close to her like she was hugging it. I then held up the book and said, "This is my book, which I'm going to read to you." I then opened it and began to tell her the tale contained within, the story of old Ebenezer and the night he was visited by 4 ghosts to learn the true meaning of Christmas. I itch. It was a story I knew well. Great Ma would read it to us every Christmas Eve since even before I was born. I may have even heard it while still in my mother's womb. And no other telling of that story, either read or recreated in a play or film, has come close to how Great Ma made the story come alive for all of us. Well, for me anyway. I had gotten to the middle of the book, Great Ma continued, when from outside of the barn I could hear dogs barking. It wasn't our family dog. There were maybe 2 of them out there. Then, following that, I heard voices, human voices, none of them belonging to any of my family, shouting at the dogs and each other. They were speaking English, but they sounded vaguely French. The voices stopped at the big doors of the barn. There came a loud banging on those doors, followed by one of the men outside shouting, "Open up! I know it's in there." My father came bursting through the back door entrance, wearing only his long johns, his boots, and coat, carrying his rifle with him. He glanced quickly at us to make sure we were still safe, and then shouted, "Who's there?" while making towards the big doors at the front. "You have something that is ours," one of the voices outside yelled back. "Let us have it back and no one will get hurt." Frightened, I looked over at my new friend, but she was no longer visible once again. Oh, how I wish I had that ability at that moment. My father opened one of the doors to talk with them. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the ones outside sounded very angry and yelled over what father was saying. Finally, they forced their way inside the barn. There were 3 of them, each carrying shotguns and dressed in large fur coats with belts that carried various pouches and gun holsters. They made their way to the back of the barn where I was, ignoring my father's protests. Soon, all 3 of them were standing over me, glaring down at me. I cowered away as much as I could. The one closest to me, with a wild, scraggly beard and missing several teeth, spoke. "Where is it? I know it's here. The dogs can smell it." I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't talk, so the man pointed his shotgun at my face and said, "I said, where is it, you filthy kraut?" Father started shouting at them to leave me alone, but he was silenced by another one of the men who knocked him down by hitting him in the face with the butt of his own shotgun. I saw my father lay there, blood pouring out of his nose. Then, looking back at the man who had his shotgun pointed at my face, all I could do was shiver, not because of the cold. He smiled coldly, his finger moving to the trigger of the gun, and I knew he meant to shoot me then and there. But then, at that very second, a very loud roar came outside the barn, a roar that was unlike any I've heard it from any animal before. I saw the color drain from the men's faces, and they all turned back towards the door of the barn, moving swiftly. I then went over to my father to see if he was all right. The bleeding from his nose had stopped, and he was moaning and blinking his eyes. He was still alive. I rejoiced. Something very large hammered at the barn door, something that made the door shake and bulge in. This made the three men stop in their tracks and visibly shake themselves. Another boom, and I heard the doors crack. A third boom, and the door splintered open. At first, I only saw the darkness of the night beyond them. Then, the form of something standing twice the height of a fully grown man walked slowly in. This thing was easily 12 feet tall, and had to hunch over to get inside through the doors. Once in, he was able to stand at his full height. He was muscular, bulky, covered from head to toe in fur, which was standing on end. He glared down at the three men, eyes wide and teeth bared. Before any of the men could snap out of their shock, the beast bellowed another roar right at them, causing them to drop their weapons. Great Ma looked at me and winked. I may have peed myself a little at that moment, too. I couldn't help but giggle. One of the men managed to come to and sprint underneath the beast's legs out of the barn. The other two weren't that lucky. The beast held them immobile with both his hands, and one by one leaned over and bit their faces clean off of their skulls. He then picked them up like rag dolls and threw them out of the front of the barn after their friend. Then he turned and looked at my father and me in the back. Pulling himself to full height, he walked slowly towards us, his eyes never leaving either of us. He stopped short where Father's rifle fell to the ground where he was hit, looked at it, then looked back at us a bit more angry looking than before. He then covered the short distance between us, glared down, his chest starting to puff out like he was making to roar once again, this time at us. I think both my father and I braced ourselves for this. I couldn't take my eyes off this beastman despite the inevitable, but then suddenly my new friend appeared out of thin air in front of him, her hands out, and speaking to him in a kind of patterned roar that sounded like a unique speech. The man-beast paused, listening to her. He spoke something back in that special language. She answered, holding up the doll that I gave her. He looked back at us while she turned and looked at both of us as well, clutching the doll to her chest. And then the most surprising thing happened. The beast man talked in English. My daughter tells me that you took her in, bound her wounds, cared for her, and protected her from the hunters. I thank you. He then spoke something to his daughter in their language. She turned and walked up to me and held the doll to me. I shook my head and said, no, it's yours. It's my Christmas gift to you. I saw her smile, say something in her language, and then she hugged me. She also hugged my father before waving goodbye and leaving her with her own father. Great Ma paused, taking a deep breath, looking out at the darkness of the trees. And as it turns out, she continued, that was what you would call a Bigfoot nowadays, particularly from a clan that normally dwells in North Dakota. Somehow they must have run afoul of some hunters from Quebec, if I remember their accents correctly, and were chased all the way down to here. She looked at me once again. That third one that escape wasn't so lucky, it seems. They found their bodies along with their dogs and horses, torn up and laying by the Niobrara River west of here. The authorities claimed it was wolves that did them in. You and I know better, yes? I nodded again, my eyes wide at the story I was just told, but Great Ma wasn't finished. She picked up her book and gazed at it lovingly. Every Christmas Eve, I read this story aloud to my children, then grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren. Because I love telling you all stories, yes, but mostly because it reminds me of that night, reading the story to a very frightened friend. She looked at me again, and every year, after I've read the story, I sit in this old room of mine and I fall asleep listening to this rocking chair. I fall asleep sitting in this rocking chair, waiting to see if maybe, just maybe, that friend would return again. Maybe to visit her old friend. maybe to finish the story that I never got the chance to finish for her. She smiled, chuckled, and looked back at the book. Seems like a fool's errand, something a senile old woman should stop doing, but maybe tonight. Who knows? Looking back at me, she smiled, pointing a finger at me, and that's the story, all true. Now, you need to get to bed, otherwise Santa won't be visiting us tonight. I giggled, then hugged her, said our goodnights, and scrambled off upstairs, where all the cousins were all sleeping. Sleep came a bit later for me that night. The images of the story Great Ma just told me continuing to play out and replay itself in my head. But soon, sleep did take me, and I didn't wake up again until the sun poked itself over the eastern horizon. Great Ma was found that morning, still sitting up in her rocking chair, looking like she was asleep. She passed on that night peacefully. The doctor said she must have died sometime after midnight. That was fitting for her. She always loved Christmas, and she got to be surrounded by all of her family that she loved. It was melancholy, but we filled that Christmas with stories of our memories of the woman who held the family together throughout all the decades. Decades have passed since then. The family farm was eventually sold. The family tries to keep in touch as much as they possibly can. Mostly it's done online, but once every other year we try and have a reunion of sorts, mostly at Bloomfield, where our clan started. Admittedly, it's not the same, but we still fill our Christmas gatherings by keeping Great Ma alive, telling the next generation stories of her life and the stories she passed on to us. Of course, I feel blessed to have been the person she decided to tell her final story to. I haven't shared this story to anyone, save for this particular journal entry. Will I tell anyone? I don't know. Maybe my own great-grandchildren if I'm lucky to live that long. However, there is one thing that I left out of this telling that I'm going to share now. What makes me question as to whether this was a true story or something she made up to entertain me is that when they found her that Christmas morning, in her lap, her beloved book was missing, and in its place was what looked like an old hand-sewn doll that was well-loved. December 25th, 2023.
Nice.
I like it. I like the callback and the doll and the ending. That was great.
Duh.
It's a good story, man. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
James, you know what that makes me think of, what it reminds me of? I think that it would be great for it. If you remember back in the early 80s, a television show called Amazing Stories.
Yes.
That would be perfect for that show.
Yeah, it would be, man. I didn't even think about that.
You can tell the decade I pretty much grew up in. So
you and me both.
Yeah.
You know they brought Amazing Stories back a couple years ago.
Really?
Well, I mean, I think it was like 5 years ago or something like that, close to that. It was like a limited run thing that Spielberg brought it back for. It was pretty good. I think it was like an Apple TV or something like that. It was one of the subscription services that we don't use a ton.
You're making me vaguely recall. I think that is the case, and now I'm going to have to look it up because I love that show.
Oh yeah.
Thank you,
that was
Bio.
definitely a favorite. All right, I guess that just leaves me. All right, guys. Get yourself some popcorn, sit back and relax. I got to put myself on this. So there you go. Thank you. I was struggling there for a second.
Storyteller guy.
Yeah.
Tell us the story.
And again, I'll explain that musical reference at the end. So far, no one's gotten it yet, so we'll get there. All right, we're going to do a little bit of time jumping there here really quickly. In the 90s, an awesome movie came out. I think it's awesome for many reasons that I've talked about on many other shows before, so I won't get into it right now. It was called The Blair Witch Project. Now, this movie was a sensation. The marketing of this movie, you thought these guys were, and lady, were actually missing and presumed dead. There was so much to it. This thing was a sensation, like everywhere. I, like many people, went to see it. For me, I actually got to see it on the night before it opened for the special radio premiere because I was job shadowing for a local radio station. And we watched it all in the Neon movie theaters in downtown Dayton. And this was a time when Rocky Horror was still like the live show was still done down there. Everything was just beautifully grunge all the time. And maybe aspects of the city and that area still kind of are, but that was really the height of the grunge movement. And that really mattered then. I came out of that movie and terrified, man. I believed the hype. I'd fallen for it so much beforehand. And the original Neon, before it was renovated, was just one giant room. And everybody was shoulder to shoulder in this room. When the camera shook, we shook. Emotions were intense. Things were wild. There was an empty tent out front to kind of kick the whole thing off as you came in, just kind of creep you out. And I remember my parents were out of town, and I was like 16 when this came out. And it was just me, my sister, and my brother, and everybody fell asleep. And even back then, I had a video camera. I was really big into filming everything, so this movie with me even more. And I hadn't seen a lot of found footage. There were found footage movies even going back to the 70s, but it was just a genre that I had never really understood or like truly experienced. And I remember I sat up in my mom's old rocking chair all night with my video camera on and plugged into the wall so it wouldn't die, just filming everything and looking around and totally just losing my shit, thinking that somehow this witch was going to come from Burkittsville, Maryland to Riverside, Ohio, break in the middle of the night and, well, I don't know what it was going to do. Maybe make me stand and look at a corner with some creepy kids and they'd never find me after. I don't know. There was a lot of vagueness there. So then we skip forward about 6 years later. And at this point in time, I'm touring with a band called Freak. I'm the lead singer. We've done a lot of shows. We've already dropped our album that had minor success at just over 100,000 sales on this album at this point. And we get invited to play a legendary venue and a legendary show. It's called Metal Mind Rage. And this thing, man, it was in downtown Boston. Not Boston. Baltimore. Baltimore, sorry. It was definitely a B word. So downtown Baltimore. Downtown Baltimore is insane. Early 2000s, even more so. Again, grunge is still very much alive in Baltimore this time, too. On our way to check the venue out, we realized that, as usual, we have forgotten to book a place to stay in our excitement. Usually we would sleep in the U-Haul, but we actually had one of the largest traveling groups we'd ever had for any like leg of any little show or tour thing we'd ever done. We had, I think it was 7 cars packed to the brim with people, coolers, tents, you name it. Because the plan was just to find a campground at that point, like right before we left, we're like, screw it. And then we had another 2 cars full of people and things meeting up with us that lived closer to the area that had never gotten to see us play, and they were longtime friends. So we stop, we look around in Baltimore, but we don't go to the club where this event's happening yet. We go ahead and we start driving. We start looking things up, trying to figure out what to do, and cell phones weren't like they are now back then. I mean, they existed, we had them, but they weren't as accessible as far as internet goes, and signal was terrible, obviously. So we're asking at gas stations for directions to campgrounds. We're looking in what remained of like phone books, trying to figure things out. And our guitarist, who I was in the car with at the time, hands me this joint. And I'm sitting there at the gas station. We're just thinking, he's like, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pretend like I know where I'm going and everybody's just going to follow me. And you and I are just going to drive until we find a place. And I'm like, Johnny, man, you know what? Fuck it at this point. We're here. Let's just do this. So he gathers everybody around, and we used to call him a fearless leader for this very reason. And he said, all right, everyone, I've solved the problem. Just as usual, follow me. And for the most part, when Johnny gave us this speech, he really did know what was going on. He was probably the most experienced musically out of all of us, aside from our drummer, Keith. But he was really good at just sorting out all the details. We didn't have a manager. We didn't need a manager. We had our fearless leader. And I'm the only one that knows that we don't know what the fuck is going on. And that makes me question a lot of other scenarios that just seem to have worked out, or long journeys we went on for seemingly no reason at the time. But you never doubted the fearless leader. Neither did I until today. So we're in the car and we're driving. We're Still working on that joint as we go. We hit Mount Zion, and now we're up there. My ears are popping. I'm sufficiently buzzed, and I see a campground sign, and I'm like, holy shit. We literally just drove and didn't veer from the path, and sure enough, our salvation was ahead. Maybe there's something to this. So we stop, we pull over, and it's a very odd campground, man. Like, it's very quiet. It's in the middle of summer, but there's no bug sounds, there's no animals chittering in the woods, there's nothing. It was odd. And the whole place gave it just a very odd vibe. We talked about that vibe earlier where like you're feeling like you're being looked at or stared at or watched, but there's usually some kind of phenomenon with power lines or some obvious scientific reason as to why you'd feel like this, but no power lines, no obvious, aside from maybe some kind of natural magnetic field that I'm not aware of because I don't have an EMF detector on me, although I did often on some journeys. So we stop, we go inside, and we let them know how many spots we need. Turns out we get this awesome little area to ourselves. It's got one of these giant outdoor cooking pavilions with a covered and screened in eating area that's like big enough for like half of our group to even sleep in if we don't want to use the tents. So we're pretty happy with the spot. This was a lot nicer than anywhere else we'd ever camped before, except for the strangeness. And after we pay, we start to walk out, and I see a brochure that's talking about the Blair Witch tours. I grab it, and I'm about to look at it as I walk out, but, all the cars are pulling in, and people are trying to figure things out, and, I kind of get distracted. We talk for a little bit, and we start setting up our tents. Start talking about how excited we are to go back to the bar and check the place out because it's the night before the whole event starts, and there's like dozens of bands playing this indoor event and like rotating in and out on different days. It's a huge festival. So, but we figured go the night before, check it out. A lot of people were gathering to drink and just meet each other. So we kind of hurriedly go through everything, and I kind of forget about the Blair Witch pamphlet right up until I hop in the drummer's car to head to Baltimore, and now we're all heading that way. And the way we're coming out, I see these really low stone walls that look so fucking familiar. This really tiny, creepy ass graveyard. And I'm kind of thinking, like, I've seen this before. I've never been here, but I've seen it. Oh, that's why. Burkittsville, Maryland, the home of the Blair Witch Project, the Blair Witch, legend in general. And I'm like, holy shit. This is like a bucket list thing, and here I am, here, without even fucking fully consciously understanding what was happening. And I'm like, I gotta remember to do something. I gotta look at that pamphlet when I get back. There's got to be some kind of cool tour. Obviously, like, I gotta check this out. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mentioned it to the drummer, and Keith's face goes pale, and he says, "Did you say we're in Burkittsville?" I'm like, well, yeah, man. You know how much I love this movie. He's like, oh, I know. But I don't know if I want to stay here. I'm like, oh, why? Because the movie. And Keith's shaking his head, and I'm noticing, like, Keith's, he's a little tightly wound sometimes, but generally he's pretty chill. But his knuckles are like white as he's gripping the steering wheel, and we're driving out of this place. And he says, no, you don't understand, man. Some of my family are from here. It was actually two of my family members that were amongst the people that actually stretched the witch out on Coffin Rock. The real legend that the movie was very loosely based on. He's like, and we haven't lived in, here since, no one in our family's lived here since then. Like, they moved after those events. There was supposed to be some curse. My family is like really squirrely about it, like really cagey, won't talk about it. But I've been told to never, go to that area because, things could happen. Of course, me being me, high as shit. And at this point in time, I've just dropped some shrooms, which have yet to kick in, but God, they will soon. And I'm just, humoring him like, oh yeah, dude, that's creepy. I'll keep an eye on you, man. Like, it's cool. I know about curses. And, I did know a lot about curses and a lot of crazy things like that, but not this one. Obviously, no experience with it whatsoever outside of the movie and what little I knew about the legend. And I just kind of calmed him down, and I told him, we're among friends. It's okay. There's such a big group. It's not like the movie or the legends. It's, there's like literally, like with our other friends' cars, there's like 10 cars full of people, man. Like there's dozens that we're fine. So he's like, okay. He finally comes down with something. We get there, we get out. By now, my shrooms are really kicking in pretty nicely. I'm feeling good. Go inside, sit down, have a drink. Drinks over, I get up and walk around the bar a little bit. I'm like, wow, this is a legendary stage. And I'm looking at all the pictures on the wall. Like Vanilla Ice has played on this stage, which was totally cracked me up, Ice Ice Baby, of course. Just all these cool bands, man. AC/DC had played here. The list just goes like crazy on and on and on. And then I see Motorhead was just here 2 years ago, and there's a picture of Lemmy. And then I hear a really familiar voice. I'm like, I'm looking at Lemmy's picture. Why am I hearing his voice? And I look over, and sure enough, he's actually over at the bar. They were the main headliner for that event. They wouldn't go on, of course, that night, but like many other people in the smaller time bands, Motorhead was there. They were there to kind of mingle and talk to people, just being very cool, which was very strange because usually that's not what happens at festivals with big, mainline acts like that. They usually don't just kind of mingle with the nobodies and just kind of wander around. It was very surprising. It caught us all kind of off guard. So I'm overly joyed about this, and I'm beelining, and my bass player Ramsey's like, dude, calm down. You're gonna look like an ass in front of him. I just showed you those shrooms, and no, dude, you gotta chill out. And Lemmy looks over, like he kind of notices us, and he can tell that I'm trying to walk towards him, and my bass player is just kind of like, like sidelining me, and he gets up in the bar and he walks over, and he's like, hey, and I just go quiet, and I'm not staring at him, guys. I'm staring at the mole. I'm staring at Lemmy's mole because as famous as Lemmy is, that mole is even more famous and circles the world over. And he's like, just standing there. And he gets quiet for a second. He's like, you're looking at it, aren't you? I'm like, looking at what? I'm trying to act on He's like, you're looking at the mole. I'm like, well, yeah. No, I'm not going to lie. I'm totally looking at the mole. And Lemmy says, it's okay. That's the first thing everyone wants to do is to look at the mole. And my dumbass looks at him and says, but has anyone else ever asked for the mole's autograph? And he just kind of stops. He looks at me for a second. And I don't know if I'm going to get punched in the face. I don't know if I've just offended this man, but I'm too out of my brain to understand what I've possibly done wrong, although I can guess. And he's like, no. And he grabs the bar napkin that is still attached because it's slightly wet underneath the bottom of his drink. And he puts it in his face like this, right over the mole. And he handed me that fucking napkin. He's like, you're the first. And then he walked away. So there I am sitting there with a napkin that has been blotched onto the mole. I'm counting it as the mole's autograph. Leave me the fuck alone. It was a victory, okay? And then I just kind of wander off. And I don't remember a good chunk of the rest of that evening after that. Because by then, everything's really kicking in for me. And I'm really kind of just, I'm really kind of shit-faced. So eventually the night winds down. And I vaguely remember getting back to the campsite. My buddy Cody that I'm tenting with has gotten so shit-faced that he's passed out within the first 5 minutes with the tent open. Just in the tent. And I'm like, man, he's already thrown up in the tent. It's only a 4-man tent, which basically was enough room for 2 of us and some gear. I'm done. I'm not sleeping in that fucking thing. And it seems like the covered shelter is pretty much full of our people in sleeping bags. So I'm going to sleep in Keith's car. Fuck it. He's not using the car. And if he needs to hide in there from the curse, there's plenty of room for both of us. And I get in the car and it's like, wait a minute. I have that pamphlet. So I get out and I rummage through my things for a second. I sit back in the car and I'm like, holy shit. This is the campground. We are at the campground right next to the woods where Coffin Rock is, where all these things were filmed. I'm wide awake. Everybody else is like winding down, passing out. I am energized. I am like peaking at this point in time from the shrooms. I need a solo adventure. It's only a mile to Coffin Rock, right? What's a mile? So I start my journey to Coffin Rock. One thing you know if you're a fan of the movie is the rock piles. You don't fuck with the rocks and the rock piles, which is also a traditional thing in many mythologies and many cultures, but you also don't fuck with the stickmen. And again, another thing if you know enough about the movie is there were those rock piles already there long before production got there, and there were a couple of the stickmen in the trees before the production got there. They just made more rock piles and more stickmen to make it seem a lot more than what it was. So I'm going through here, and I see the rock piles on the cage, and I see a stickman or two, whether they were put there for some nefarious, witch-based curse, or it was locals having a good time. Either way, it added to my spooky environment in the middle of the fucking woods. Certainly not sober, headed to Coffin Rock. And the closer I get to Coffin Rock, and at this point in time, I'm getting pretty close, I realize I'm going to have to walk a mile back after this. And I'm not peaking anymore. I'm starting to lose a little bit of my energy. I'm still wide awake. But I'm dreading now that walk back, as I even finished the walk there. But I make it. Again, still no animals, no chittering, no hooting, no flapping of bat wings, no insects, no buzzing, nothing. This whole walk. And now that I'm focused on the dread of the walk back, I'm really starting to pay more attention to my surroundings, not just the map I'm using, because I'm actually using the map to find my way there, and there's markers there for the tour and everything, so it wasn't like I was lost in the woods or anything like they were looking for Coffin Rock. It was clear where it was, and it was easy to get to. But I'm hanging on that silence, just that utter silence. And growing up in the woods and part-time a reservation, one thing is if the woods go quiet, you get the fuck out of the woods. That's just what you do. But what do you do when the woods were quiet the whole time and have been the whole day, the whole time you're there and all night long? I had never experienced that before. So the answer was pay more attention and go forward. Getting that oppressive feeling again, man. That feeling of eyes, the closed-inness that just really irritates you because there should be a normal explanation for it. But out here in the middle of nowhere, there is not. And I get to Coffin Rock. Coffin Rock is pretty fucking cool. It's a giant rock. It's a giant rock that many years ago they strung out a witch and disemboweled her on it and left her to die, and that's the end of that story. Of course, it goes a lot farther in the movie, but I'm trying to focus on realism. I'm trying to get myself in this headspace, what this was like for these people. Why did this happen when the kids went missing? The whole witch trial fever, just so many things that have happened in culture and pop culture and real culture and history. And it's all combining in my head and fueling now what I swear is things moving out in the woods. I'm not seeing a single animal, but now my brain, which I cannot trust, is telling me that there are things circling me in the woods. But yet I'm still hearing no sound, no rustling, no movement of rock piles, absolutely nothing. So I lay on the rock. I want to get the full experience of Coffin Rock. So I'm laying there, hands over my chest, pretending I'm in a coffin, laying on this giant rock. And it's beautiful outside. It's not the clearest night I've ever seen, but it's a fairly clear night. I can see the stars well enough. There's no pollution out there. So everything is just gorgeous, but unsettling as fuck because it's still absolutely quiet. And then it's not quiet. Suddenly, I'm hearing one of the loudest rustles through the woods that I've heard. Again, absolute danger at this point in time. Everything in my brain is telling me, get the fuck out, go, run the mile back. You'll die because you're out of shape, but run that mile back. But I can't. I am sitting on this rock. I'm staring. I am now seeing the sections and branches moving. And then I see what's coming out of it. And I don't know what the fuck it is exactly. My brain screams, it's Bigfoot. I'm having my first real encounter. There's gonna be a conversation. This is Bigfoot, but it's not. It's not Bigfoot. It's tall. It's about 7 feet tall if it was an inch, but it's covered in bark. Bark that's cracked in places that almost looks like dry, dark brown skin until you notice that it is definitely bark. And it's not like some really tall person pasted bark onto their skin and wandered out of the woods to fuck with locals, or not locals, people that aren't local, tourists. but it is a continuous piece, like a growth, like an encasement, like it's a tree, but it's got arms and legs, it's got a head, it's got all the, the movement and the features of a person, but it's covered in bark. And its eyes are recessed, and there's all this mold growing, but it's only really growing thickly around where eye socket should be, and in where the eyeballs should be, but except for there's no eyeballs. And it comes closer. And, I feel like I'm gonna piss myself at this point. I know logically I should evacuate my bowels and my bladder, and I should run, or I should do something, but there's not even a fight or flight response. There's just me, still clearly high, still clearly on mushrooms, still a little bit drunk, staring at this thing coming out, knowing that this was not the Bigfoot encounter I was hoping for. This is I'm dead now. This is whatever this is. This is the end. It's all over. It comes closer and closer, and it's standing to where the edge of the front of its right foot is on the rock, just staring down at me. I'm just laying on this rock, looking back and staring up it right into its mossy ass, fucking filled wooden eye sockets, I guess. And it nods and it says, "Guardian," but not as if it's identifying itself as a guardian, not as if it's questioning me if I am the guardian, as if it knows that I am the guardian, and it's greeting me pleasantly. But it's also clearly waiting for me to speak back or address it in some way, and I'm coming up with nothing. I'm still shaking now so badly. So I do what I always do in a time like this. Pulled my cigarette case out of my pocket, put one between my lips, and I lit it. If you guys know me, you know that's pretty much what I do in every life situation, including when I'm here on the show telling stories. It's how I process the world around me. Always, since I was 12 years old. And I took this deep inhale and let it out. And I nodded back. And this was a really dumb thing I did. I stared it again right in the mossy sockets, and I said, "Tree." And it stops and looks at me again, just not disgust, but this level of disdain that's palpable. I was supposed to have known some kind of code, I guess, some kind of secret handshake, some kind of greeting. I don't know what it is I was supposed to have known, but this was not what I was supposed to have said or done. Fuck me, right? One more random situation Raz has found himself in and does not have appropriate response for. That should surprise no one. It sits. It's flat on the ground. It's ass on the ground, legs out in front of it. It's covering the majority of the rock now that my body compared to it is not touching. And it just stares and levels that eyeless gaze at me. And it waits. And I'm trying to again figure out what this response is going to be. So I sit up. Hit my cigarette again, of course. Because what else are you going to do at a time like this? I don't understand. What is it? What are we doing here? What are you doing here? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to say to you? And again, that palpable disdain. And it says, "You're here because I brought you here." I said, no, certainly I am here because my dumb ass did a lot of drugs and decided to walk in the middle of the night a mile into the woods. Sir, that is why I am here. And he nods. Or she, or it, whatever we would like to discuss. And it says, "You were here because I needed you here." And I said, no. We just went over this. I am here again. Drugs, legs, woods, a mile fucking walk. That is why I am here. I'm pretty sure I've got to be hallucinating this. this. Like, I'm past the scared point. I'm just being so cavalier with this thing that this is a hallucination. I didn't do that many shrooms. At least I didn't think I did, but maybe they were stronger than I thought. And this, me coming off the peak, was just the first peak. And maybe there's like 12 more that I don't know about. But again, no, I brought you here. Okay, genius, if you brought me here, why? And it says to me, these woods have been silent for too long. Okay, guy. I mean, I could tell they were pretty quiet when they came in. I just thought that was kind of how things worked around here, what have you. But is there something in particular that I'm supposed to do about that? He says, yes. You are here to guard the woods. Okay. How do you expect that I do this? That I guard the woods? Which, by the way, I don't even live near or in or by. Like, I'm from Ohio, man. Like, what the fuck? And he says, guard the woods. You've guarded many woods. Oh, I have. Oh, news to me. Apparently, I can now put the Guardian of the Woods on my resume. Guys at the video store are going to love that. Okay, so how am I guarding these woods? He's like, take the rock. And he gestures to a giant rock pile. If you don't know anything about rock piles and the lore of the rock piles, never take a fucking rock. That's bad. It's bad juju. It's bad energy. It's negative karma. It's whatever you believe in. It's just bad. Don't fucking do it. So what did I do? I took a rock. Because this giant thing that I'm not sure whether it is real or not real tells me I need to take the rock to guard the woods that he brought me into, although I disagree, in order to I don't know what. So this is a new magical journey. So I take that fucking rock and I stand up, obviously, to take the rock. And I walk back onto the giant coffin rock, and he stands again, towering over me. And he nods. And he just walks away. He walks back into the woods, the same branches. And I'm out. I'm done. I'm cool. Rock goes in my pocket. And here's where things get a little bit spotty for a second. I'm back at the car. And I say I'm back at the car and things are spotty because, I ran. I took right the fuck off. I don't remember a good chunk of that run back, but I can tell you that I was sweaty. My lungs hurt so bad. I was coughing. And there was a little bit of blood, but nothing, too bad. I hope. And then I jumped in the back of fucking Keith's car and I locked myself in because the car will save me. And if you've ever seen any movie, the car will not save you. They'll just bust right through the fucking glass and drag you out, or just, I don't know, kill you while you're inside. So now I'm convinced that I'm just going to die in my sleep and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm now taking a rock, and what that means, taking the rock, now clicks in my head, and I'm pretty sure that either I was just goaded into something really stupid by an actual metaphysical being of some sort, or by my own hallucination and ignorance. And either way, what it boils down to is I still got this fucking rock. I'm freaking out, so I pull a joint out of the other pack in my left pocket because, yes, I had a pack of joints in one pocket and a pack of cigarettes in the other, and that's what you do when you're on tour. You want to have your joints ready to go. It's important. So I smoke a joint. I'm trying to calm myself down. I'm pulling the rock back out of my pocket. I'm looking at this rock. It looks like a normal rock, not anything strange. They tend to use flatter, wide rocks in their piles to stack, and this was one of the top rocks, one of the ornamental rocks for the pile. So, it was a little bit of a different shape. It was a little taller, a little wider. It was one of the ones that were not smooth whatsoever. It was a very rough rock, but still round-ish, spherical almost, not quite. And I'm just kind of moving it from hand to hand in between hitting my joint. And it's warm. Like, this rock is warm. And this is right not long after all the nerve damage, so I have a hard time, if you know me, feeling temperature. But this thing was warm enough that I could actually feel it, which meant it had to be pretty fucking hot. And I'm just hand to hand. And then I pass out, like right in the middle of a thought. I remember that my brain suddenly clouds over and I wake up the next day. And this wasn't a drug induced or I'm tired, falling asleep. This was all of a sudden, every one of my faculties simply shut down all at the same time. And I woke up sitting there in the same position I was. The roaches for 3 more joints were in my lap, mostly smoked, which I apparently did at some point in time during this, or someone or something did. I don't know. 5 cigarette butts are in the car ashtray right next to where I'm sitting that weren't there the night before. It's all right. I guess despite the weird feeling I had, the shutting down, that I guess it was just my conscious brain that shut down and my body just did whatever the fuck it wanted. Cool. I go to get out of the car and there's a giant handprint on this car about the size of that thing in the woods. At this point in time, I'm realizing this was not a hallucination, but I obviously clearly don't recall all the details of the meeting except for the weird conversation I had and the demands of eating the rock. Other people see this giant handprint. Everybody assumes I'm playing a prank on them. I'm trying to explain to them what I went through exactly. No one's believing a damn thing until we leave for the show. This was a super weird day because we go, it was our day to actually, do the performance. We were, less of a, not that big of a band, so we had to be one of the closing acts for night 1. We get there, I'm pretty shaken up. I kind of forget about it throughout the evening. We have a pretty good time. We do our sets. We get to meet a lot of great people. I'm done with the shrooms for the trip. I just felt like a good idea to not maybe do anymore. Say no to drugs, kids. Got plenty high, but did not drink as much as usual during a show because again, I just felt off, man. We come back. On our way back, we get stopped by this guy in a pickup truck. He wants to know what the fuck we're doing in Burkittsville. We explain to him, the big show in Baltimore. Our band has a place here. We're staying here, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, have you been in the woods? And I'm like, no. Woods, no meat. No. I was nowhere near those woods except for our camping spot. And they're like, okay. There's been some strange things going on over there today. Generally, that means some moron has been fucking with things, and we just wanted to make sure it wasn't one of you. I know a shortcut. Why don't you just go ahead and follow me? Guy leads us out of town. Not to the campgrounds. He leads us out of town. And he pulls a shotgun out of his truck. And he stands there. Because at this one time we've stopped and realizing he's taking us out of town. And Johnny, fearless leader, rolls down his window, looks over and says, sir, this isn't the campground and all our stuff is there. He's like, well, nope. This is what we call the rolling detour. And you can look at this up on Reddit and a lot of other places. People will tell you that have gone here. The locals do this because they don't really want people there. All the tourism that the movie gave was not a lot of great tourism. There was a lot of defacement of properties. It got overwhelming for little Burkittsville, and they really don't care for the tourism. And apparently this guy and a couple other people take it upon themselves to, when they notice people, they just pretend they're being friendly, and then they threaten you and at the town limits, basically. So we pretended to drive away and then waited about 45 minutes in the cars somewhere else and then drove back as quickly as we could through town back to the campgrounds and parked and got out. And by the time you get to the park grounds, they've got like some security ish there. The people there usually stay pretty late at the campgrounds, and the office was open when we got back officially, like after 3 a.m. And we told them what had happened, and they said, yeah, don't. I know it was scary. I apologize. That's just how some of the people in town are. But did any of you guys go to the woods? And we're like, no. They're covering up that I went in there. I'm covering up that I went there. They're like, we can hear the crickets tonight. And we stop and we listen, and sure enough, we can hear crickets. Literally over 24 hours being in this place, and we've heard nothing until, there's crickets. Okay, cool. Yay, crickets. They're like, yeah, that's not a good thing. that usually means something's stirred up and things are about to happen. And I'm like, whoa, whoa. So the silence is the normal okay thing. And they're like, oh, yeah. You guys might want to stay on alert, or, if things get weird tonight, if you need to leave early, we'll give you a refund, whatever. I'm like, no, we're fine. So my other bandmates and some friends decide that they want to go explore the woods, and they're trying to get me to lead this exposition out, this whole expedition out to Gotham Rock, and I nope the fuck out. I'm good. I've had my experience. Like, you guys go out and have fun. There's only 3 of us left at camp. It's me, Cody, who's drunk and asleep in the tent again, completely unzipped, just laying in the tent, passed out, vomit the floor again. And then this person I really didn't know at all. It was another bandmate's friends that lived in the area who came to kind of travel, that lived close and wanted to see our show. I didn't really know her. She seemed okay. But she got in her tent and zipped it up and read, I guess, to read a book, apparently. So it's just me. I was the only one awake. Got out and I sat by the fire. Kind of kept it going. I feel this heat in my pocket. It's that fucking rock. And I did not have that rock in my pocket. I left it in the back of Keith's car. It had been in Keith's car since that night. No one had removed it from the car. It actually shifted it to the trunk, just to be safe because it's a trunk. But it's in my pocket and it's hot. I take it out and I start moving it from hand to hand and I sit there, and the next thing I know, it's morning. The rock is not in my hand. I got that same fuzzy, like my brain and everything just shut down kind of feeling. But again, there's a couple roaches. There's some cigarette butts to, I guess, is some kind of evidence that I was still actually awake without understanding it or being in control of anything. And apparently their expedition went fine. It was nice. Everything went back to being quiet again. Just out of nowhere while they were out, suddenly the cricket stopped and they just never started again. Everything was, had righted itself whatsoever. And I just had this really disgusting feeling, like something that happened that I still don't understand and I may never understand. But I also noticed that I've got these markings. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it. No, you can't really see them in the camera. It's this weird crisscross pattern right in the center of both palms. I've had it since then. They're pretty deep. They're not normal, lines that you would normally see as you get older or anything like that. They're obvious patterns, like hatch marks patterns. My hands just feel like they're on fire. And the longer I sit in this chair, my arms feel like they're on fire. Then my whole body just feels like a fucking, like a fountain of heat. We go back to the bar, kind of wind down. It's the last show day for everyone. We mingle. I'm a lot quieter. I'm not drinking at all now. Just cigarettes and weed, and even the weed. Again, if you know me, I don't really get high a lot. I mostly just chill out and relax, and I'm in less pain, and I can be social, which I'm having a hard time being. Show's over. We go back. I just lay down in the car. I don't get out. I don't interact with anybody. I just slept in the car that night. And that night I had weird-ass fucking dreams. And when I woke up the next day, there was that giant handprint back on the outside of the car. Again, some roaches scattered around, that weird feeling that something happened last night, and me having no memory of it and only remembering the point at which my whole body shut down. And I took that rock out of the fucking trunk and I tossed it in the goddamn woods. Now, some people say you should put the rock back where you found it, but once you violate a rock stack like that, it's done. It's happened. There's no appeasing it. It's done. And I just tossed it out into the woods because it should at least stay where it belongs. I'm not taking that fucking thing home with me. So, we leave the area. We leave Maryland. We start traveling home. The farther away we're getting, the better I'm starting to feel. I don't feel like I'm hot all over. I don't feel sick to my stomach. I don't feel fuzzy. I feel all right. I'm good. And we stop off a time or two on the way home. It takes about, 48 hours to get back to the house because, we're dicking around, seeing roadside attractions, etc. on our way back to the band house. We part ways with the people that weren't, coming all the way back with us. And each day I'm feeling better. I don't have any weird experiences where I'm blacking out, where I'm losing time, where things are obviously happening, but I have no recollection of them, etc. Make it back to the band house. I go home. I'm at that point in time, I'm living with my mom at the moment because we're gone so much that it just seems pointless to have a place. And when I don't stay with her, I stay with one of the guys in the band or whatever. But I decided to go home, and for whatever reason, I went home. I crashed for the night. Woke up the next morning. Mom was like, "Oh, I love the souvenir you brought me. Where is it from?" And I was like, I can't even register that she's talking about a souvenir. I didn't bring her back anything. I usually do when I go out. When I would go on tour or conventions, I'd always bring her back something cool. But it was just such a weird experience and weird time that I just didn't have a chance to do that. I'm like, oh no, we were out in Maryland, and I went to Burkittsville. My mom was also a big fan of Blair Witch. Apparently, her and Dad had seen it the day after I'd seen it while they were out of town. But it was just something that she was always also fascinated with. She's like, "Oh, so that's what this rock is. Was it from one of the piles?" And she holds it up and literally like right towards me, and I'm looking at this rock, and it's that same fucking rock. And I don't want to touch this rock. I don't want to be near this rock. And Mom was like, "I really love it." I'm like, "Mom, you need to ditch the fucking rock." And I tell my mom what happened. I tell her the same story pretty much that I'm telling you guys. I show her my hands. At that point in time, they were a lot more scarred, a lot more so than they are now. They were pretty fresh then. More like a branding scar than anything. And she's like, "Oh, she's like, that's a weird story, etc." She tends to believe me. My mom and my grandma and I and my brother were the ones that really believed in all this sort of stuff and a lot of the family legends and wide array of religions that we all have accumulated over the years. But she doesn't want to get rid of it. It's too cool of a memento. So what she decides to do is she digs up part of the gravel driveway and she inserts this fucking rock in the ground and then puts earth back on top of it and lays new gravel down. Now, since then, my mom has paved this driveway and this rock is still down there. And every time it snows or it's icy or anything at all, the next day there is a dry spot on the ground about yay big where that rock is buried exactly under the fucking ground with no explanation. None. It just heats up. But I would not stay at my mom's house for almost a month after this. And I don't know if it was how deep she put it into the ground. And to be honest with you, I don't know how deep she put it down. I know it took her like 2 hours of digging, which she's an older lady. Even then, she wasn't in the greatest shape. It couldn't be more than like 4 or 5 feet down, I would guess, but who knows? But I guess it was deep enough to where I didn't have those kind of blackouts when I started staying at mom's again. Still that eerie feeling that still exists today, especially if you're in the driveway over that spot. But it melts everything. And if you put your hand on the ground is hot to the touch, even on the pavement. But every day I wake up and I look at my hands and I remember, well, I don't remember, and that's, I guess, the biggest part of the problem. I don't really remember why my hands are that way. I don't know what I did. I don't know what I'm guarding or what I was guarding or not guarding. I don't know why I took the fucking rock. I don't know what that thing was. Just more questions. But 8 times, exactly 8 times since that weekend, I've had some weird experience in the woods with something or another. And every fucking one of them has started with whatever it is, coming out of the woods, looking me right in the eyes, dipping their head and saying the word guardian. All I can hope is someday I figure that out. But until then, who fucking knows?
Okay, then. Won't be sleeping for a while.
Wild ride.
And if you do, you won't remember it.
Well, tonight's been fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine
I
doing
think
mushrooms
Kyle
under
put in the
those
chat that he figured out the reference there.
I mean, oh, the music reference?
Yeah. I wasn't sure what it was. I was supposed to be listening for the reference. I'm not sure if I caught it.
No, it wasn't in the story. It was just the storyteller guy thing that I have underneath my name there.
Oh, okay.
It's
That
a
one there.
reference to green jelly / green jello, Three Little Pigs.
Okay.
It was obscure.
Not
I was
that
bored.
obscure.
I mean, obscure enough, I guess. But no, I'd done shrooms in the woods tons of times before then, peyote, all kinds of things, and that had never happened up to that point. And that
Yeah, but like
specific thing.
not at night in a haunted forest.
What can I say? I'm me. I would do it today.
I can imagine the whatever it was that you saw went back to his buddies and went, yeah, the tourist fell for it.
Probably. Totally. I would not doubt it. And it spread the guardian thing around to just enough things in the woods that they just continue to fuck with me for no reason, just make me wonder for the rest of my life.
Unleash the crickets.
Exactly. And it kind of feels that way, like a paranormal prank show. Like that's that's still almost the vibe I get today.
Like, Frank, we're going to have to. You're
Both
going
got
to
to be
the
Dennis.
one to, Dennis.
Because you both had characters named Dennis in your stories, so now it's Dennis.
Dennis, you need to leave the handprint on their car.
I almost threw in there that this thing said its name was Dennis just to mess with you guys for fun. So then we had 3 Dennises. So
Night
that was
of the Living Dennis.
Exactly.
Well, because
that was a cool coincidence, though.
That was the name of my stepfather, and from here on out, all evil, bad characters will be named Dennis.
It was the name of the shadow in my story tonight.
Do what?
It was the name of the shadow in my story tonight.
Dennis. So we're going to do the part of the show where we remind everybody who the fuck we are and tell them where they can find us. And we're going to start that with you today, Len.
All right. Len M. Ruth, horror author. I'm most easily found on TikTok. I have like a fleeting presence on the other social media platforms, but like Instagram's where I go to like unwind, like, and just look at random stuff. Like TikTok is all books, and my books, yes, these are wide. This is the Unrecovered that came out last year. That's Apocalypse Pandemic. And that one,
close up of that.
Let's see where.
There we go. Yeah, we got to get the close up. There we go.
I really thought that was a virtual background behind you, Len. I really thought.
Yeah. All right. So, like, full disclosure, this is a backdrop.
Okay, it looked real until you moved it. Like the whole thing was.
Is the axe
no,
real?
that axe is plastic.
Okay.
It's hollow and plastic.
But it's an actual prop. It's not part of the backdrop wall.
Poser.
Yeah, no, I have some prop stuff here. Like, hold on, let me see if I can. Aleister Crowley's Last Breath.
Nice. That is awesome. That is so awesome.
Oh, but anyway, so this is available wide. Like, you can find it on like most online retailers. I think it's in a couple libraries, but it's not in any brick and mortar stores. But this Apocalypse Pandemic one is the virus activates the pleasure center in your brain and overloads it to the point where you're no longer able to feed or care for yourself, and that's how the world population expires, right? Because they're just like a heroin addict on the nod, just like so like it. You get to do some really fun stuff. Like, what do we do with all these people who aren't dead but have no chance of survival? I wrote the first draft in 2017, and the reason it took it until this year to come out is like I was revising it during the pandemic, and everyone's like, "Yeah, no one's gonna read that now, dude. Like, we're living through that. Like, put that thing away." So I didn't change anything in it. So like it was an interesting experiment, at least for me, to see like what I got right and what I got wrong. And like, yeah, it's pretty macabre. I can go into it too much.
Darn it, reality.
I know, right? Getting in the way of my fiction. This is Rachel's Apocalypse Diary. You can get this. This is 2 novellas in one. The first one is available free when you sign up for the newsletter at lenmruth.com, and that's only once a month. But I'll probably release this paperback when I release the sequel to The Unrecovered. But for right now, I like it being like you can only win it when I do giveaways on TikTok or whatever.
That's super cool.
And this
still
last
trying to
one, the
win.
pull is what's that?
I'm still trying to win one.
Well, we're doing so. I'm giving away the first and half edition. Like when I was doing all the formatting, I was like playing with the chapter headings and whatever. And I just have a couple of copies that are like, don't have the second edition writing on it and don't have the Seal of Solomon. It's kind of faint here, but yeah. So that's available wide as well, and that's demons, cursed objects, supernatural, time travel. Like there's a lot going on in this one. This one gets, I think, is a little gothic and a little heavy and a little slower moving. It's like one of the old time slow burn horror novels. But those are what's out now. I've got the sequel to The Unrecovered is drafted, but I don't know when the release of that is because there's a long road between the first draft and the book release. And then I've got another really, really screwed up like biological horror space opera weird body modification weirdness. I don't even know how to classify that one. That's in editing, and that may come out before the Unrecovered sequel. So I could just start putting all these series out there and making people wait for the sequels. It's like, dude, settle down and finish the series. But yeah, those are all available wide. Should be available at anyone's favorite online retailer.
Nice. Over to you, Ron.
Over to me, Ron.
Ron with sports.
Hi, Ron.
Practically everything that he knows nothing about. So, I'm coming out with my first book through Fate Core Publishing. As you can see, it's right here. This way, over here.
You're getting in the way of yourself, Ron.
Of course I am. I'm always getting in the way of myself. Is that it? Right over here? There it is, right there. It's called Inside My Nightmares. It's just under 300 pages long. It's 8 short stories. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to be received from people. I hope that I get some good reviews on it. Though it may be the first book, I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to be the last because Raz and Jenny and everybody at Fate Core is kind of lit a fire under my ass to start writing again and to finally get on that bucket list item of getting some stuff published. I've already got a couple more short stories lined up for a next collection, plus I'm in the process of writing a novel as well, which Jenny has read a little bit of, which I'm tentatively calling The Secret of the Ooze, which has absolutely nothing to do with Ninja Turtles.
Damn it.
Ninja.
Damn
it. No, it's definitely more of a horror / very much gore centric story. Very dark, apocalyptic. I'm having a good time writing it. I have to say it's been a very fun process coming up with ideas for this story. So if you want to find me, thanks to Jenny, I now have an author page on Facebook, Ronald W Gillespie Jr. _author. If you want to look it up, I'm going to be updating that on a regular basis as I get more information with the release of the book, reviews. I have yet to start my own .com, although that may come later when I actually have more stuff to post. Other than that, you can also find me here on YouTube at Wolf Dojo and also on TikTok under Wolf Dojo as well. Wolf Dojo is my basement. It's where I practice martial arts and I post a lot of martial arts content because that's what I do when I'm not writing. So look me up there, find me, and also here on Allight Network doing Allight Society, Legends by Night, and Tomb of the Terrible.
I do want to make a small prediction about the reception of your book. I sense that it's going to be received in the mail.
Or by Kindle.
Yeah.
Ebook reader.
All right, James, we are over to you.
Well, not much to say here. I do a lot of blogging. I do a lot of reviews and other kind of podcasts. I do write a bit, and I watch a bunch of movies that sometimes I review on with my pals on the Tomb of the Terrible every other Monday night. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we are going to be discussing the classic Monstered.
Yes.
So if you want to play along yourself, it's free on Tubi. This will be my first time, and
the last time.
Yes. See, I discovered quite recently that maybe just maybe, I've seen Manos, The Hands of Fate, far too many times. That is, well, it's getting to toxic regions almost. Because I made the mention that right now I'm getting my new foot on Wednesday, and because right now with the one that I have, I'm using so many thickening socks that I feel like Torgo when I'm walking. And only one person got the reference. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, man.
So, yeah. And usually this is the part where Halloween Bear makes an appearance, but he's on the other side of the room. I didn't feel like picking him up, but yeah.
It's okay. We still love you, Halloween Bear.
He'll make an appearance tomorrow.
Oh, there we go. The sloth is out.
Nice.
And that leads us over to Jenny.
Hi. I recommend not training a puppy in the winter because you'll be awake and cold throughout the night and foggy. You can find me at, of course, here on Elliott on my page, Friday with the Library in the Blue Box. My group's Friday's Disorganized Library. I like to hide on TikTok is how I found the wonderful Len M, Ruth. And find me at Fakecore. And randomly, if you message my friend over here, Raz, you'll be messaging me. Anyway, to you, Raz.
Me or Dell or Fakecore.
Yeah.
All right. So I am Raz T Slasher. You can find me at raztslasher.com or all the lovely social medias that Jenny has been awesome enough to help me set up and learn because I suck at social media. So other than that, you can find me hanging out with Dennis, walking through the woods and stealing rocks that don't fucking belong to me. I want to thank everybody at home for tuning in. And if you didn't catch us live, don't worry. You'll catch us on the YouTube immediately when this is over. We'll be getting more shorts from all our campfire episodes. So if you just want to hear the stories, you'll be able to watch the senders so you can catch the individual stories. And don't forget to spay and neuter your friends. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night, John Boy.